All right, good morning, everybody. And thank you for attending the Business of Advocates Advancing Cell and Gene Therapies workshop. I apologize for the delay this morning. Being the first session of the meeting, there's always some technical difficulties to get worked out. So thank you for your patience, and I promise this is going to be a really great and informative session. My name is Allison Bradbury. My primary day job is a principal investigator at the Center for Gene Therapy at Nationwide Children's Hospital, and I hold dual faculty in the Department of Pediatrics at The Ohio State University. I also, for the past 2 years, have served as chair of the Patient Outreach Committee for ASGCT, so this is my last workshop as chair of this wonderful committee. So thank you for attending. The committee is putting on this workshop, and we're co-hosting it with NORD. So thank you to NORD for their contribution. As a reminder, this workshop does require an additional registration fee to attend, so that should be on the back of your badge. If it does not list this workshop, you can add it at the registration desk. Attendees, please do not use flash photography to distract presenters. And the Wi-Fi network is ASGCT Wi-Fi, and the password is ASGCT 2025. Also, make sure you download the ASGCT Events Meeting app for free in the App Store. Kim.
Good morning. I am Kim Nye, and I am the founder and executive director of TESS Research Foundation. I'm also lucky enough to serve on the ASGCT Patient Outreach Committee and on the Education Committee. So thank you so much for being here today. I'm going to go over the Code of Conduct. So all annual meeting attendees are expected to be respectful and conduct themselves according to the meeting Code of Conduct. Demonstrate respect and consideration for fellow meeting participants. Communicate in a civil, courteous manner and refrain from belittling or bullying behavior. Be mindful of fostering equitable inclusion in meeting spaces, including for those of all races, cultures, disabilities, ages, and genders. Uphold accepted professional standards of ethical conduct in sharing research and ideas, and adhere to ASGCT's discrimination and harassment policy. I'll hand it back over to you.
So I'm going to introduce the first 3 speakers of this morning's session. First, we have Ms. Kim Nye, who's the co-chair, and we'll kick off the session by giving an overview of the business of advocacy. And then we have Ms. Nasha Fitter, who's the co-founder of Fox G1 Research Foundation, which started after her daughter was diagnosed and serves as the co-founder and chief business officer for Citizen Health. She will discuss their organization's model as an ultra-rare nonprofit. Dr. Allison Barrett is a trained veterinarian and serves as a chief science officer of the Foundation for Angelman Syndrome Therapeutics, along with being a mom of a daughter with Angelman. She will explore FAST's model as a more mature nonprofit.
Okay, so as I just said, I'm Kim Nye, and in addition to being a founder and executive director of TESS, I also have 2 children with a rare disease. So you'll hear a little bit about that. And this is just a quick overview as we jump into the business of advocates advancing cell and gene therapies. We'll see if I can get this to advance. There we go. Oops. Can we go back a slide? Did we do that? Okay, I have a feeling this is not. Oh, there we go. Perfect. Okay. So I wanted to just start off with this idea that a nonprofit is a tax status, not a business model. I think that sometimes nonprofits don't get the credit they deserve because there's this thought that because we are nonprofits, we're somehow not real businesses and that somehow this is going to be easier than real business. But anyone who has jumped into this space of rare disease nonprofit quickly finds out that nonprofits are very much businesses and that they require a lot of strategic decisions and a really thoughtful team to bring it all together. I would guess that for most people in this room, sorry, me and this clicker are just going to have a lot of fun today. Okay, I'm gonna raise my hand when oh, you're telling me something. Point, okay. Next slide. Aim the clicker back there. I will point, there we go, okay. So I would guess that most of you are in this room because you have had a personal experience with a rare disease or with someone who has a genetic disease. In fact, why don't you just raise your hand if you are somehow personally connected, just to see if my guess is correct. Okay, I think my guess was correct. So for me, that moment when I knew that I was going to head into advocacy was when my son was born. This is my son, Colton, when he was just a few days old. And I can remember looking down at this newborn baby and just knowing that he was never going to speak, never going to talk, never going to live independently. And the reason that I knew that when he was just a few hours old is because his big sister had gone through the same experience. She was 10 years old at the time, and we had heard this story. We had seen this before, and it was devastating. And I knew that we couldn't just stand by and watch. I knew that I wanted to do something. So like many of you, I started a nonprofit organization. And quickly found that the juggle is real. So there is this entity of each one of you, or in my case, me, and we're often the executive director or the CEO or the founder. And we start putting together our team, which often starts with the governance side of things, so assembling a board of directors, creating bylaws, having policies and procedures, and trying to figure out sustainability. You add to that the operation side, which includes fundraising and program implementation in order to drive research. There's a human resources side, as we're lucky enough to hopefully have some paid staff and some volunteers. And then there's a lot of communicating to do. It starts to feel like a lot of pressure. You add to that the lived experience that so many of us have, right? Many of us are coming into this space because we have a child at home who is very unwell. And especially in the beginning years, I think a lot of us are also carrying other jobs. So many people are doing this, in the wee hours of the night and morning, and that pressure starts to feel like a lot. So I think I just wanted to acknowledge all the things that each one of you guys are doing, and just I'm excited for today because we're going to talk a lot about how we handle these businesses and share some of the learnings. We have amazing speakers today, and they'll share things that have worked, things that haven't worked. Many of them are at different maturity levels. For those of you who are just starting out on this journey, some of it will feel a little overwhelming because you'll think, wow, how did they get there? But everyone started at the beginning, and it is amazing to see that the progress that you can make and the immense just the immense hope, but also like real tangible progress that happens. So these are some of the terms that I think you'll hear today. You'll hear about drug development, internal capacity, fundraising, science, contracts, data. It's a lot, but it'll be exciting to tease it apart today. All of us, I think, have the similar goal, which is to drive patient-centered research. So I think what is so meaningful and important about the business of advocacy is that we feel this sense of urgency, and we always have the patient at the center of everything we do, because that is who we want to help, and it really is what drives us. We're lucky enough to have a lot of champions, and those champions will be industry partners, researchers, other nonprofit leaders, clinicians, and I think what's amazing is this network that comes together to really drive research and create better treatments. We have co-hosts today. One is ASGCT, and I really do encourage you to access their free and reliable patient-friendly resources on cell and gene therapies. As you guys are probably finding out, ASGCT does a phenomenal job with these educational resources. So you can scan these QR codes or go to their website. There are some really great resources there. I also wanted to pitch a save the date. This is for 2026, so March 11th and 12th. ASGCT will be having a cell and gene therapy summit, and I encourage you, maybe go back to the previous slide, to join to join the Patient Press, which is a really great newsletter that includes the latest events, resources, all relevant for all the things that we are all working so hard to do each day. I also wanted to acknowledge the co-host for this workshop, and that is NORD. NORD's website is rarediseases.org, and they also have some incredible educational resources. For me personally, some other sites or organizations that have been really helpful are Global Genes, so check them out. And then the Milken Institute also has these really great educational resources through Faster Cures and Train. And I just wanted to close by sharing my contact information. I'm happy to talk with anyone who has further questions. There's my email address, and that's my cute family. And I think I will leave it at that so we can start hearing from some of our experts here today. Should I? Nasha, you are up. Okay. I think this works maybe 50% of the time.
Love it. All right. Is everyone awake? It's kind of like mood lighting in here, you know? It's sort of, so I hope you've all had coffee. I'm also very short, so. Okay. I can't wait to have fun with this clicker. Where am I pointing here? Okay, there we go. All right. Let's just get going. Oh my God. Oh, shit. Okay. All right. Good. Okay. That's my name, Nasha Fitter. I live in California, Northern California. I've got 3 kids, a dog, a cat, a husband who incredibly is still with me. And like most of you, I have a child with a rare condition. Also, like most of you, I have no background in science. My background was finance, it was tech, it was data. I worked at big companies like Microsoft. I started and sold my own tech company. My career was going great, my life was going great. I'd worked hard to get to the point I was, and then all of a sudden, Amara happened, and I had to reevaluate. And what I hope to convey in my presentation to you today is that you could use your background in your quest to find a cure and really innovate. So for me, that's been co-founding the foundation, co-founding Citizen Health, which is a consumer health startup, which I'll talk about, and also being on the board and really closely involved with the Buffalo Initiative, which is a venture philanthropy fund for rare diseases. This is like killing my flow, I gotta tell you. My God. Okay, I don't even know where I'm pointing. Is there like an AV person here who's gonna point to me? Okay. What did you push, Kim? Oh, okay, here we go. All right, so that's my adorable daughter. So just to level set, FOXG1 syndrome, ultra rare disease, very similar to most CNS conditions, very severe. Most kids don't walk, don't talk, have, seizures, all of that. My daughter was having hundreds of seizures a day before she got diagnosed. And the prevalence is about 700 in the US, about the same internationally that we know, and it's what we call the missing middle. So if you have an ultra-rare disease that's under about 10 patients, there's a really nice pathway with the N of 1. And if you've got over a couple thousand patients, you have a lucrative business for pharma. But anything in between is kind of stuck. And unfortunately, the majority of rare diseases fall in this place, the missing middle. And so that leaves all of us as advocates forced to really find a way to find cures for our conditions. When Amara was diagnosed, we didn't have we didn't really know anything about the syndrome. There was not a single mouse model, no registry, nothing. But since 2017, we've been able to raise $13 million. We have developed and are taking our first gene therapy into clinical trials. We've pioneered an entirely new way to do natural history studies, and that falls into my company, Citizen Health. And we have organized a very disorganized global community with 5 international chapters. And this is possible. There was nothing special about us. We were able to do this. And a big part of this was really looking at how do we develop a drug? What is drug development today? Okay, so when you look at drug development, it can take up to 30 years. Allison's next, she'll talk to you about how, Angelman was cured in a mice for decades, right? It takes about 30 years, 150 to 180 million dollars, and therein lies the problem. The net present value of an ultra-rare disease is $100 million. So it makes no financial sense for a company to really go into this area. So we have to find a way to innovate and do things differently. So what we've done in our foundation is we decided to really think about how can we do this cheaper, better, faster. And we built what we call our blueprint. And if you look at where you can save a lot of time, a big place is between basic to translational science. A lot of time gets wasted there. The way you think about patient data, natural history studies will save you time, will also allow you to get an accelerated approval so you don't have to do an expensive phase 3. So there's different things that you can do. We are following this pack, and we hope that at the end we can say, like, here's how you do this. And actually, it should take less than 12 years because we made a bunch of mistakes early on that wasted a few years. So hopefully others can kind of learn from what we've done. Okay, sorry. How could I go back? Okay, so I'm going to give you 8 lessons today. Again, this is my experience, my experience. All of you will have your own experience. So you take what people give you as advice and filter it. So my first is make sure it's not about you and not about your own child. I see this again and again where people who run advocacy groups make the mistake. You start to think you own the gene. Oh my God, now this thing is just like turning without me even pushing it. Okay, you own the, let me put it down while I'm not doing it. You own the gene and you can't make it about you. You won't be able to build a successful organization. Kim talked about, these are really businesses we're creating and you've got to create a movement. You cannot do it alone. If you are really serious about developing drugs and being there for your community, you cannot do it alone. You have to build a team. And what's really important about this is to also think about the people that you get along with. There's lots of diseases where you have multiple advocacy groups and it's terrible, but in some ways that's real life. So make sure the team you get along with, you have a shared vision, you're professional, and you can march forward together. And a big part of this is setting the vision, setting a really clear message. And so for us, I would say the first month of the foundation, I developed our path to a cure, and we still have it up on our website. It really hasn't changed. We're now excitingly at step 5, but this is what I put together. And so when I started to build the team, I said, this is what I want to do, guys. Who's with me? Who wants to do this together? And that also made it really easy for fundraising, right? When we were doing step 1 of building mouse models, like who understands what that is? It was really easy then to tell a donor, this is step 1 in our path to a cure. So getting a really clear message that everyone can align to is critical. And now you'll see we're on step 5, and our message is super clear. So whatever stage you're on, just make that message really clear. It gets very convoluted a lot of times when you start talking to folks who run foundations. There's so much within it, and the average person can't distill that. So you just want to be really clear what you're doing at what stage, and then focus everyone's energy behind that. Okay. Lesson number 3, be careful who gives you advice. Oh my goodness. So we've been really lucky to build a great scientific advisory board and business advisory board. After my many years in doing this, I will tell you that unless somebody has literally developed a drug that has been injected into a human being, not a mouse, not a monkey, and gotten an approval, they do not understand drug development. They don't. They think they may do because they know one little piece of it, but they don't get it. So be very careful when you're making strategic decisions who you take advice from, because it could set you back. Number 4, get out of academia as soon as humanly possible. Okay, we funded 11 academic projects, only 1 was successful. Many millions of dollars were wasted on many exciting projects, only 1 was successful. And that one that was successful has become successful because we've connected them really closely with our team at Charles River. And now our gene therapy is with Charles River, and that's what's taking it forward. So you just have to be really careful, be careful with your contracts. And the way we've done it is we've literally created a virtual biotech company within our foundation. So we hired somebody from pharma who, again, has developed a drug. Dr. Guy Aylon, he actually was at Ultragenics working on Angelman syndrome. We've developed a fractional team of experts, and then we have a small advisory group that really guides our drug development. And then this team is also managing our academic lab. And so in that way, we've been able to really close the gap between basic and translational science. And I'm happy to talk more after for more details on how we did that. Okay, number 5. So I used to be more unbiased about this, given that I'm a co-founder at Citizen. But 5 years into this, I'm just going to say you should join Citizen. There is a reason why the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative, after following every registry platform, Citizen is the only one it's given a strategic investment to, because it actually works. So a big mistake I see, and we did this early on, was to create a registry and create surveys. Number one, surveys are really burdensome for patients. So because they're burdensome, they're not going to do it again and again. If you don't have longitudinal data, your data is basically useless. You cannot use it for any type of regulatory purpose. So it ends up becoming a bit of a waste. Number two, a lot of people fall into, you talk to someone, a clinician, they want to do an in-person natural history study. Again, very burdensome for patients, very expensive, and will be almost useless at drug development if you don't know what your endpoints are that you're measuring. And you won't know what your endpoints are until you get to that stage. So Citizen as a platform collects medical records, all of our data is trapped in our medical records, extracts information from those records. You're not burdening patients. For FOXG1, in 1 year, we were able to create a very depth natural history study that's out for publication. And this is what we have been using for our drug development. Okay, number 6, get creative with fundraising. So you can't do anything without money. Unfortunately, that's the elephant in the room. You need money. And we've done all kinds of things. You know, we have a children's book we put out. We started a clothing line. That was a bust, by the way. We get our global community to fundraise. We do all kinds of marathons across the world. One thing that I've learned is you have to ask people for what you want. So we met a billionaire early on. We asked him to donate, told him our story. He gave us $10,000. We got a little bit smarter. The next time we met someone really wealthy, we asked for $1 million donation. We got $1 million donation. Huge lesson for us. It was really scary to ask for that $1 million. But the thing is that someone may not give you $1 million, but they're definitely not going to give you 10,000 then. You set the expectation of what you want, and you have to get really creative with fundraising. The most success we've had is to do small events throughout the country, where if we have a donor or we have a wealthy family, we will ask them to invite their friends, small dinners, cocktails, etc., and then we tell our story, and that's how we've been able to raise a lot of money. But this is really critical. And like I said, we've raised 13 million. We're raising another 10 this year. This is possible. You can do it as well. Okay, number 7, this is my last lecture to you. Your mental health is a priority. This is a marathon. Without you being at your absolute best, nothing is going to be possible. So make sure you get your friends, your mentors. Everyone on this panel is a good friend of mine and who I go to in times of, despair, and you will have that. Don't let new parents coming in give you a lot of anxiety, because if you remember when you got your diagnosis, you probably were not your best self. If you're running an advocacy group, you're going to be dealing with a lot of parents like that, and you've got to create a way to really support yourself during that time and take a deep breath and know what you're doing. Think innovatively. Healthcare in America is broken. You keep doing things the same way. Again, your drug development is going to take you 30 years. So we were able to innovate with our natural history study. If everyone innovates, one part of drug development will really, be able to change the game. Take care of yourself, exercise, whatever you want to do, take antidepressants, smoke weed, whatever, but take care of yourself, right? Alice and I were just talking about this. Look, this is your life, right? You don't want to look back on your deathbed saying, wow, those 2 decades sucked. You're going to do this work anyway, so you might as well enjoy it. Look at it as an intellectual challenge. You're learning a lot, you're meeting great people. Whatever happens will happen, so enjoy yourself and live your life well. Okay, thank you. Do I introduce Allison? Okay.
All right, next we have Allison.
Okay, well, Nasha just did it all, so I think we can have a 15-minute break. If everyone wants to go to the bathroom, I don't think I have much to say. Well, I'm very excited to be here. Thank you, Allison and Kim, for the invitation to speak with you all today. I was talking to Nasha when we started. This is a journey. It certainly is, and you look back on it with a bow and you talk about this really amazing journey you did, and people are inspired. But there are trials and tribulations of this journey, and I'm going to walk you through the journey. But I hope in the question session and the conversation, we can walk through the triumphs of the journey, because it looks really good on paper and in a slide presentation when you're given 15 minutes. And so I was asked to speak to you about a model of a mature nonprofit. I don't feel very mature as a nonprofit, so that was quite a title to be given, and an honor, but I hope I don't disappoint you, because I don't feel we're the most mature. We're working our way, trying to figure it out as we go, and we are definitely flying the plane as we build it. And I'm gonna hopefully, yes. Okay, so my name is Allison Brent. I am the Chief Science Officer at FAST, the Foundation for Angelman Syndrome Therapeutics. I wear a bunch of hats. I'm also the co-director of the Angelman Syndrome Biomarker and Outcome Measure Consortium, which is a pre-competitive consortium that we started in 2016 in order to be able to advance endpoints that are both meaningful and measurable that can be used for regulatory approvals. I'm the co-director of a collaborative effort with the Simons Foundation and FAST called InSync, the International Angelman Syndrome Research Council, which is a really exciting group of steering committee members. It's a brain trust for neurodevelopmental drug development. And it really is an unbelievable team, a very small team that helps to advance not only drug development for Angelman, but a nominated disease every year in the neurodevelopmental space. I serve as the Chief Development Officer at an accelerator called AS2 Bio, which I'll talk a little bit more about. I'm the Strategic Advisor for Non-Clinical and Clinical to Mazi Therapeutics, and the job that I actually went to school for that I wanted to be since I was 8 years old was a veterinarian. I'm a veterinary internist and an interventional radiologist. I've been running clinical trials my entire career, developing devices for animals with naturally occurring diseases for the ultimate goal to translate them to the pediatric population. So that's where my whole life was, where my whole life started, and what I was pretty excited about. And then things changed. I am the mother to 3 beautiful little girls. And I'd like you to meet Quincy. Quincy is my middle daughter. She lives with a rare neurogenetic condition that's non-degenerative called Angelman syndrome. Here are my disclosures. Next. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit more about, as an advocate, wearing all the hats, because you really have no choice but to do that. And you have to do that with, as Nasha said, a team of amazing people that believe in your mission. And so I'm going to walk through the patient-parent hat, the clinician-scientist hat, the community hat, and the hat that we need to wear for all of our stakeholders. And then we have a unique set of avenues we went down where we also wear the industry venture hat. And really, as you put all of those together and you think about that holistic journey, that is the true way to define your success, is when you can control what happens for the disease and the group of diseases that you are so passionate about. So as patient parent, there's going to be a lot of clicks, guys, so when I go like this, maybe you could just click for it. Awesome. It's understanding the patients and their families. Understand their needs, understand their wants, their challenges, and please understand their dreams, because they all have them, and they were shattered when they got this diagnosis. Find your team, as Nasha said, and surround yourself with the people that will protect not only your child, but your family. That means other family members and friends that generally were really a huge part of your life, and those people change when you get this diagnosis. The people you surround yourself with will absolutely change, and that's okay, because sometimes it's survival and you need to be around the people that are going to support you the most, and it's not always the people you expected. You need to create a plan. Go back, 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 back. Thank you. You need to create that plan, and ultimately, you really need to then get to work. And you don't have a lot of time to dwell on what's been put in front of you. For me, it was, we have a problem and we need a solution, and we need to get to work, and that's the path that I took. Next. Okay, next. As a clinician scientist, I want to understand what's the impact of this disorder? What are the symptoms of this disorder? A universal lack of speech, complete sleep disturbance, some kids sleep 2 or 3 hours a night, life-threatening and debilitating seizures, significant developmental delays. Kids with Angelman syndrome don't speak a single word in their entire life. They can have very significant seizures, and they will ultimately never live an independent life. That's a lot to take in when you hear the word Angelman syndrome. So you have to understand what your families are going through and what that impact has on their life. And then for me as a clinician, the first place I went was trying to understand the biology. What is Angelman syndrome? What is the biology of the disease? And is there a way we can solve this? And really, the only way we can understand a path to solving this was to understand the biology of the disease. It's a single gene disorder. It's a very unique single gene disorder in that it's non-degenerative, it's haploinsufficient, but in neurons, it's null due to a silencing mechanism on the paternal allele. So understanding that unique imprinting phenomenon of Angelman syndrome that most other genetic disorders do not have was not such a hardship as much as an opportunity to say we have many ways in which we can approach this disorder. What's been published? What's out there? And what do I need to work on? What do I need to understand? So really trying to understand the science behind this. Has anyone done anything therapeutically to help this disorder? What needs to be discovered? What other opportunities are out there? What tools do we have? And what tools do we need? We needed to create a roadmap to meet those goals, and we needed to become the lowest hanging fruit. All right, this one's going to be a lot of builds. So on here, we took a matrix and we said, what are the things in drug development that would make us the lowest hanging fruit? Why? Because the only way to get interest in pharmaceutical companies or investors is to de-risk yourself as much as you can so they don't have to do all the work. So if we want to be appealing to anybody, we needed to understand the biology, we needed to have the right models, we needed to have proof of concept, we needed to develop biomarkers, clinical endpoints that are measurable, that have a regulatory track record. We needed to understand if there have been prior approvals or failures, what those were, and how to navigate around that. Were there competing trials that make us appealing or less appealing? Oh, do we have a new clicker? Awesome. Thank you so much. Yay. Do we have an understanding of the patient population and what is the IP landscape around all of the different assets that maybe we're going to be funding or developing, and how can we ensure that we can keep our finger on that pulse? So when you look at disease ABC, you look at disease DEF, and you look at Angelman syndrome, really what I want to highlight is that we have low risk, dark blue, mid risk, moderate risk, medium blue, and high risk, light blue. You could see there's a lot of darks on Angelman syndrome. And where we're risky is that we have no prior approvals, so we don't have a regulatory pathway, and our biomarkers are in progress. We're farther advanced than many others, but we don't have a very clear biomarker for consideration of an accelerated approval. So when we think about our weaknesses and we compare that to other diseases in the space that are opportunities for other industry members, Angelman syndrome rose to the top because we filled all of these buckets. And I think having these buckets is very important as you strategically define your roadmap of how to become that low-hanging fruit. And so we created an ecosystem, and this ecosystem took us from discovery to preclinical, to developing endpoints and biomarkers, to understanding the community, the population, what's meaningful and what's measurable to this population. Where do they live around the world? What's the census of the world population of Angelman syndrome? How do we accelerate all of the work we're doing in the preclinical and discovery space in order to get it into the best experiment of all, the human experiment? And then how are we going to run these clinical trials efficiently? And we needed to ultimately populate every one of these buckets in a way that allowed us to have an entire ecosystem of drug development under the hat of the foundation so that we can ensure we're not trying to push in on somebody else's space, instead allow them into our space. And that was the fastest path to making progress. And so as a community, we needed to consider all therapeutic strategies. We needed to scientifically de-risk every opportunity to see what benefited the population most. Just because it works in a mouse does not mean it'll work in a human. Just because it works in one disease does not mean it will work in another. We needed to create our roadmap, and we needed a plan and an ask. And so that's how we got our largest influx of funds. We had a plan, we had an ask, we had 6 therapeutic platforms, the development of an endpoint and biomarker consortium, and the models that we needed all put forward. This is what it's going to cost, and this is what it's going to take. And we committed to do this in 24 months, which was very bold. But we were going to get to human candidate for 6 therapeutic platforms in 24 months, and it was going to cost $5.8 million. That wasn't to get to humans. That was to get to human candidate, so that we can get through the studies that are regulatory required in order to get to humans. And we did that. And we got to our first candidate in 6 months. And so the roadmap really was, we can replace the missing gene or protein with various different strategies. We can unsilence that silencing mechanism that I mentioned with various different strategies. You have to understand the science to understand the strategies. And we needed to think about the downstream effect of the gene and what impact that could have at the protein level. And then we needed to be prepared. We can't do all of this and not be prepared to run these clinical trials. Otherwise, they will fail before they even started. And so this is really what that roadmap looks like. Basic research, drug discovery, preclinical, IND enabling, clinical trial, phase 1, 2, 3, and then an FDA review. And at the bottom, while you're doing all of that in parallel, you have to have all of these other pieces, that pillar 4, really populated. And so when we think about the tools, there's lots of them. You don't need to do all of these, but there's lots of tools that you can develop, and we did this as a foundation. We put all of those tools that are available for access for all. Academics, industry, it doesn't matter. All of our tools that we fund are fully available very quickly for all. No MTAs with academic institutions that take 6 months to a year in order to sign contracts. That's not in the best interest of our children. And so we make everything available very quickly, more so through a ex-academic or out-academic model. And that's very helpful. We ran a natural history study, 18 years of a natural history study. 18 years allows longitudinal data, as Nasha mentioned, longitudinal data in a prospective manner with endpoints that are in the clinical trials. This is natural history data. If you don't have longitudinal data, it's not useless, it's cross-sectional, but it's not nearly as valuable. And so you really have to ensure, if you're developing a natural history study, you understand what it needs in order for it to be valuable, or you do waste a lot of time and a lot of money. We develop the endpoints to make a master protocol for clinical trials. This isn't meant for you to read. This is a graphic meant for you to see. We took all of the domains that impact the lives of our families. We developed endpoints or utilized endpoints that were already developed to create a master protocol for clinical trials that everybody can use. So you need a synopsis for your pre-IND meeting. Here you go. Modify as you wish. We don't need them to reinvent the wheel. We do it for them, for every industry member. We funded over $4.5 million into doing this, and this has served us so incredibly well. And at the end of the day, this is what you get. This is a mouse with Angelman syndrome. This is that same mouse after a gene replacement therapy with hematopoietic stem cell gene therapy. This is progress, but this is a mouse, and it's important that you can see the phenotype change in a single mouse. It's profound, but the best experiment is, how do we get to humans? And when you get to human candidate, that's when everything changed. That's when we decided to take it out of an academic lab and start a company. And we started a company called Genetics Biotherapeutics, which was meant to advance an antisense oligonucleotide where we had human candidate to a first-in-human clinical trial. And we did that through a venture philanthropy approach. We brought all the right people around the table. Everybody needed in a biotech company that was virtual, and we got orphan drug designation, rare pediatric designation, fast track designation, and partnered that program for a phase 1/2 clinical trial with Ultragenyx Pharmaceuticals, who then acquired the program in 2022. And that infusion of funds from that acquisition to the foundation, which was $50 million, allowed us to develop an accelerator. And this was acquired because of positive clinical data. So what you can see here is that natural history study data data. You can see on the, I don't think I have a pointer here, but you can see on the left that trajectory going up on the top left in communication. Natural history is flat. On the right in cognition, natural history is flat. Those patients treated with those ASOs, their trajectory was far surpassed that of natural history. Ionis had an ASO clinical trial to follow and found the same exact thing. They had the same benefit. And so this is the mouse. This is the ASO in the mouse. The ASO in the mouse actually looks like it has a lot more lack of rescue than rescue compared to our AAV, our HSC, and our CRISPR. But it rescued the phenotype in the human. So the mouse and the human are different. The best experiment is the human. So this allowed us to say the ASO looks amazing in humans. What about the AAV? What about the HSC? And what about CRISPR? Let's go. Let's get them all there. So drug development is complicated. It's expensive. For every one drug that gets approved, it costs nearly $200 million for a genetic targeted therapy. Our foundation is focused on this spot, that $15 to $25 million spot where we can de-risk, get human clinical data, do the best experiment, the human experiment, and then partner with a responsible party to pass it off to phase 3 so that they can approve and commercialize and reach all of the individuals around the world living with Angelman, which our foundation cannot do. And so this is where we started an accelerator in order to be able to do that, which is disruptive. It's not common, it's unique, but we went from patient advocacy group to disruptive accelerator in order to do that. That ecosystem that I showed you allowed us to fund over $60 million of research. We established 5 companies. We have over 30 academic grants and 95 grants in 30 academic labs, and we were able to accelerate to first in human for not only one program, but we just cleared our IND, we announced it yesterday, for our AAV gene therapy. And so we are going to be advancing these programs very, very quickly. We got a beautiful $40 million NIH grant for our CRISPR program. We got a $6 million CIRM grant for our HSC, hematopoietic stem cell autologous gene therapy program, and now we just cleared our IND for our AAV gene therapy program. And so that has all been done on the backs of parents, on the backs of experts and parents coming together to meet a mission. And this is what the roadmap now looks like because of the passion and the power of you. And that's exactly how you do it. So I can tell you drug development is hard. And managing the nonprofit organization, the research and discovery is harder. Industry members, it's harder what we do than what you do. I can assure you because I do both. But I can also assure you, living with the rare disease is harder than anything. Waking up every morning and going to bed every night and telling my daughter, tomorrow is going to be a better day because mommy's working really hard for you, that's the hardest job that I have. That's the hardest job that we have. And we are working every single day to make that difference. So don't sell yourselves short. Give yourselves some grace. Understand we are making the impossible possible because what's the alternative? We don't have one. So that's why parents don't fail when industry does, because we don't stop. So hopefully that can share some light on some lessons learned. This is just my reason, this beautiful little girl named Quincy. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's my honor to introduce the next 3 speakers. So we have Mr. Michael Hund, who is the Chief Executive Officer of the EB Research Partnership. He will be sharing about his organization as a model for an ultra-rare venture philanthropy and how to reinvest to advance the field. After that, we'll hear from Mr. Terry Piravalakis, who's the Chief Executive Officer at Alpida Therapeutics and a rare disease dad of a son with SPG50. He will share how their model as a large organization doing venture philanthropy. And then we'll have Dr. Claire Booth, who is an expert in primary immunodeficiency and gene therapy and leads gene therapy clinical trials at UCL Great Ormond Street Institute of Child Health. She will share their organization's model for a nonprofit institution to license and deliver gene therapy products. So first up, Michael.
Good morning, everybody. And first of all, how about a round of applause for ASGCT for bringing all these inspiring leaders together? Amazing. And in my favorite city, New Orleans. So if anybody needs any tips, I come here often, so you can find me afterwards. I'll tell you what to do on your free nights. My name is Michael Hund, CEO of EB Research Partnership. I've spent 20 years in pediatric rare disease. I got my start when I was 18 years old, working with young people with HIV/AIDS for the actor Paul Newman in the Hole in the Wall Gang camp, and ended up doing that for 10 years, working in cancer research, and got an MBA focused on one big question: what business models can accelerate treatments and ultimately cures for rare disease? We talk about zebras a lot in the rare disease community. Maybe you didn't think you'd come into this room and we'd be talking about buffalo. So zebra is the symbolism for the rare disease community. For me, it is a buffalo. Now, just by a show of hands, has anybody heard the story about buffalo and cows in the Flint Hills of the Kansas Prairie? I know you have. So I'm a country boy. I grew up on a cattle ranch, and I was told this story when I was a kid, about the difference between buffalo and cows in a rainstorm. And here's the story. Rainstorm is coming across the prairie. You've got buffalo and cattle in a field. They behave exactly oppositely. So what do? The cows see the rainstorm coming, and they back away, and they run away, and they move away. And what happens? That rainstorm just kind of follows the cows around. They never get over it. It's a hovering cloud. It follows them around. They don't address it. They don't confront it. So what do buffalo do? Buffalo do the opposite. They see that rainstorm coming, lightning, thunder. It's scary. It's challenging. It's messy. It's muddy. It's dangerous. But they defy the odds, and they say, we're going to run right at the storm. And what they do is they herd up, and they put the weakest among them right in the middle. And they charge at full speed, thunderous hoofs, right through that storm. And it's difficult for a minute, but they get on the other side where there's light, and there's hope, and there's optimism. Now, you've heard from some inspiring parents, from Nasha, Allison. There's probably so many more in this room. This is what the rare disease community is. Freaking buffalo. They do the hard things. You heard Allison talk about 20 jobs in one. They get up, they put one foot in front of the other, and they march and they charge every single day. They do the hard thing. So to me, these parents, these organizers are buffalo. They've decided to take that leadership and put their communities in that herd in the middle and charge forward. So many familiar with rare disease. So I won't spend too much time on the statistics, but it's daunting, right? More people than cancer and HIV combined. 1 in 10 people on the planet. Now we believe 400 million people, 10,000 rare diseases. 1 in 2, that means half don't even have a rare disease foundation. But we've got this big market problem. 95%, that is audacious. 400 million people on the planet. 1 in 10 affected by a rare disease, but 95% do not yet have an approved treatment. This is a market problem worth solving. And I challenge everybody in the room to dedicate their resources and time and effort to help us start to chip away at that problem. Now, EB, epidermolysis bullosa. What is EB? Stands for butterfly children. And it's called butterfly children because the skin is as fragile as the wings of a butterfly. Many of us, we get a scrape, we get a wound, collagen flushes the system and starts to heal. This is not the case for 500,000 people in the world with epidermolysis bullosa. Life expectancy is 1 to 30 years old. Full body bandages, it's like living as a severe burn victim every single day of your life. What's the good news? One gene mutation that we've discovered, that we've pinpointed through much hard work, we have the target in our sights, we have that storm to run towards and through, we have our goal, we have our end game. Now our co-founder, the great Eddie Vedder, and we're very lucky that Eddie and his wife Jill have taken up this cause and given us a platform, but Ed says, from the resiliency of families and the commitment of scientists together, our ambitious goal is to cure EB in this decade. One of the things that we've learned, and this is the best advice we could give to rare disease foundations, or really any business, be audacious, be ambitious, and set a timeline. Now, we didn't just pull 2030 out of the air. Our mission is to cure EB by the end of this decade. By 2030, we consulted with scientists, patient communities, and philanthropists. We have an end game. We want to put ourselves in the business, and in the process, pioneer a model that can be used by any rare disease foundation. So how are we doing? What have we done so far on this process? Well, when I joined 7 years ago, $2 million had been raised. There wasn't a lot of hope. There wasn't a lot of optimism. There was a phase 3 clinical trial that just failed. There was nothing in the pipeline. We've been able to raise $72 million, fund 160 projects in 25 different countries, and from just 7 years ago, 25 times the amount of clinical trials. And I'm proud to report, as of 2 weeks ago, we now have 3 FDA approvals. 2 of them are gene therapies, all of which we actually funded. So again, when you talk to families just 7 years ago, it's not that long of a time. 7 years. Stepping into this community, we'll never have a cure, we'll never have a treatment. There was bone marrow transplants. They were 50-50 that the child would even survive the therapy, much less impact the EB. We've seen this landscape transformation, and as a foundation, we've actually funded more than half of those clinical trials. Our business model is being taught at Yale, Harvard, all around the world. I always laugh because, you know, we've been in Nature and we've been in Rolling Stone and Spin. We're a little bit rock and roll. You know, you got to be disruptive. You got to mix things up a little bit. You heard Nasha ask and talk about asking during the pandemic. Actors and celebrities and musicians were sitting at home. We just started asking, can you learn about EB? Can you do a short video? And we built a global movement called Venture into Cures. So what I want to talk about today is, what is the model? How does this work? Well, it's complicated. We've heard from a lot of people. But if I was going to condense it to 3 simple pillars: data platforms. This can be registries, natural history studies, biorepositories, imaging banks, genomics, phenotype, genotype, collaborative consortiums. You know, yes, it's been said, academia doesn't always work, it's not always efficient, but it really can be with the right incentives. How can we collaborate and incentivize people to work together? And that extends to industry. You know, many people here at this conference, pre-competitive consortiums, getting everybody at the table. And finally, our business model, venture philanthropy, what we'll talk about. You know, when we think about data, we were starting from scratch, like many rare diseases. And what we decided was, you know, literally lock in a room, bioinformaticians, patients and their families, clinicians, researchers, biotech and pharma, and we said, we're not leaving here until we understand how data can work for all these stakeholders. And what we left with was a 1-sentence question. What if navigating your journey with a rare disease was as easy as entering a destination into your GPS, but the right and left turns are the right treatment for the right patient at the right time? So we've spent 6 years building, and we learned. You know, we started with the wrong academic partner that didn't share our aggression and our tempo and our speed. We ended up at Stanford University on the West Coast. And we decided, you know, data, I don't think anybody uses the word good UX when it comes to our healthcare, right? But every other app we use, we can find the best New Orleans coffee place within 5 minutes in an instant, but we don't hold rare disease and healthcare to the same standard. So we built something called Curator, and this was actually an innovation during the pandemic. We realized that we could send at-home genomic sequencing kits to patients. So they don't have to leave their home, they swab their cheek, they send it back to Stanford, they get a one-on-one genomic consultation. They decide, patients in the driver's seat, patients control their data, when and how they want to use that and when they want to share it. And they get a platform that's usable, that it's friendly. Within minutes, they can find the best medical center that specializes in their child's rare disease. They can find clinical trials that they're a genomic map for. They can be connected to publications and research using AI and machine learning to put it in layman's terms. Community forums that are moderated. You know, so many of us go to social media sites, but it's not unique and specific to your child or to your rare disease or your subtype of a rare disease. So we've innovated that based on genomics and phenotype, really curate the medical journey. And on the back end, biotech and pharma, patient communities, clinicians, researchers can have access to this de-identified data with the permission and consent of patients. Consortiums. We started a consortium of 22 academic medical centers. Listen, it was said, right? 501c3 is not a business model, it's a tax status. We negotiate hard deals. Capital is an asset. So with capital comes expectations. We say we will fund this consortium, we will fund your lab, but we require that you share data. We require that you play nice in the sandbox with others. And in some cases, we've grouped that consortium into our portfolio. So who are the 5 leaders in gene therapy and gene editing? Who are the leaders in squamous cell carcinoma research? Who are the leaders in protein therapy? And we built consortiums within the consortium to put speed into clinical development. We started something called an IPSL consortium with Stanford, Colorado, and Columbia in New York. And we said, you know, we will fund you all, but you need to work together, and it shaves 6 years off of getting into clinical development. So what is venture philanthropy? In a very simple sense, what venture philanthropy means is we don't just write checks and hope for the best. Yes, we are philanthropic, and yes, we are a foundation, but we negotiate good deals. You know, we've started 10 companies in the last 5 years. Of those 160 projects, every single one that we fund has an equity position in it because our shareholders are the patients that we represent. So if there's commercialization, the revenue comes back to the foundation to fund more research until we cure the disease. Now, some of this has been talked about. I'll summarize. Clinical trials can take a lot of time. Clinical trials can cost tremendous amounts of money, but I want to hone in on that phase 1 in rare disease. It can be a few $1 million, right? It's achievable for a foundation. The value proposition, the valley of death, we all talk about it. But what I really like here to focus on is that hope premium, right? There's so much hope in the patient communities when we've discovered the gene, when we've got a researcher working on this, right? That can be 5 years, that can be 10 years. There's projects that will be worked on infinitely, right? But the hope is high, and then that drops off. Because to go into IND filing in a clinical trial takes money, resources, support, de-risking those assets. Getting through a phase 1, boom, that hope trajectory goes right back up, right? There's commercial interest, there's market data, there's biotech and pharma that are now interested because that's been de-risked. The rare disease market is not just good for patients, this is good for business. This is approaching a $340 billion market. That's going to more than double from where we sit today. What's good for patients is also good for business. So let me give you a couple quick examples of what I'm talking about. My first year here as CEO in 2017, we raised the capital. We get creative. Yes, we do the walks and the runs, but we do concerts, we do music, we do bowling events, we do sporting events, we do Aussie Rules football, whatever it takes to raise the dollars. We bring together the research community and say, we want the best and brightest ideas. We're agnostic, whether you're an academic, whether you're a company, whether you're a startup, whether you're public or private, it's the science that wins. We put together a world-leading scientific advisory board to rate that science on NIH standards. We've built a board of directors that has biotech expertise, venture capital expertise, private equity expertise, and we make a decision on not only what the best science is, but what the best investment is. And I challenge everybody in the foundation space, think about what is the best investment, and this is where things really change. We negotiate venture capital deals, and I'm going to underline that. We are a foundation. The only difference is that our shareholders are patients. So I hear some people talk about venture philanthropy. We'll take 3X and go away, take 5X and go away. No investor does that. No investor does that. Take equity positions. Yes, university tech transfer isn't easy, but we built contracts that we got 3 universities to agree to. So we say, we will invest in you, but this is a take it or leave it venture contract. And often rare disease in our spaces can be the 800-pound gorilla in the room, right? We're not getting money from NIH. We're not getting money from the government. So the foundations have leverage to make really good deals and negotiate good agreements. So then when that project is commercialized, returns come back to the foundation to create this sustainable cycle. We did this with a company called Crystal Biotech. We put in $800,000 into the company back in 2017, 2018. You may have seen the news 2 years ago, the first ever approved treatment for EB and the first ever topical gene therapy. So we took that equity position and we did 3X our return on investment, took the cash, invested in more research, cycle starts again. So what does this look like? Does this look familiar? Angel investor, new product, finding a commercial partner, exit, let a larger commercial partner take it forward, keep your equity stake, and start it all over again. Another example, we actually funded work at a university. We take equity positions, not in the IP, because that's a non-starter. We take equity positions in the future rights to monetization, which is legal semantics, but I tell you it really matters to tech transfer because we create a scenario where they can address it down the road. So if that IP is ever commercialized, we take a financial position. We put $500,000 in a gene therapy project at Stanford. That was then, they were approached by a publicly traded company that wanted to acquire that IP. We renegotiated our equity interest in that company, and we cashed out for $3 million. So 2 weeks ago, this was the third approved therapy, FDA approval for EB, the third approval, which is the first surgical gene therapy. And so what did we do there? A donor gave me $1, I turned it into 6. We de-risked an early stage asset, making it attractive to biotech and pharma, getting it through a phase 1 clinical trial where industry can step in, market validates it. We did 6X our return and we can start the cycle all over again. What's new to us is actually, since we've started multiple companies, spinning them out into a for-profit venture where we can take philanthropic dollars, we can take return-seeking dollars, and all of those accelerate and advance commercial assets. So what does this all mean, right? We talk about business models, but you heard from parents of what this actually means. This is my friend Rowan. Rowan's now 10 years old. Rowan wasn't able to go to school dances. Rowan wasn't able to play soccer. Rowan was always treated differently from other kids in her class. For 2 years, Rowan's has been receiving the first topical gene therapy, and she's walking. She's playing soccer. She just went to her first school dance, all because of the dedication of a group of families that came together with a really great business model. So what does venture philanthropy mean? What does venture into cures mean? What is the output of all this work that we mean? We talk about time, we talk about money, we talk about business models, we talk about outputs. It means more time back for children that battle rare disease, away from doctor's appointments and hours of bandaging and bleach bath, to just be a kid, to play sports, to go on adventures, to be that next doctor that may make a breakthrough in another disease. So my challenge to everybody in this room is to be disruptive, be innovative, be audacious, set ambitious goals that are time-stamped, and be a buffalo. I have 4 daughters, and we show each other this all the time. The sign of the buffalo: be brave in the face of danger or uncertainty or the hard thing that people have not yet done. Be brave, be a buffalo, go forth, and I thank you, everybody, for your time today.
Thank you, Michael. Now we'll call up Terry.
Hi, everybody. My name is Terry Perpolakis. My journey started on December 17, 2017, when my youngest son, Michael, was born. A normal, healthy birth. We were home within 3 hours, our third child, and we thought our lives would continue on and just move along together. On April 2nd of 2019, he was diagnosed with a disease called spastic paraplegia type 50. We were told, go home and love him. He'll be paralyzed from the waist down by the age of 10, quadriplegic by the age of 20. He'll never walk, he'll never talk. There's very few patients in the world. We know very little about the disease, and there's nothing you can do about it. I was in the room thinking to myself, well, not thinking to myself, telling the doctors, take out whatever you need. Let's get this operating room next door open. Let's take out my heart, my brain. I don't care what you have to do. Let's just do it. I'll do a hard car right now. And they told me, Terry, unfortunately, this is not something you can fix with yourself. This is a genetic problem, and there's nothing you can do, unfortunately. And at that point in time, I knew I had to do something. I would give up everything, my life, my financial investments, whatever it took to help this little child and these other children to lead a better life. And I was fortunate enough to meet some amazing people along the journey. And 2 days after Michael was diagnosed, I decided that I had to do something, and I talked to my wife and I said, are we willing to give up everything that we own, everything that we're doing right now to save this little boy? And we were totally on the same page. A month after he was diagnosed, I came to this exact conference. It was 6 years, pretty much to the day, I put up that Wanted a Cure for Michael poster at this conference, thanks to Alexis, who allowed me to attend this conference. At the time, it was not a patient advocacy conference. It was strictly for scientists and neurologists and not people like me. And I was fortunate enough to meet 6 of the 7 world experts in gene therapy. I then flew to Sheffield, England, and I met the 7th world expert in gene therapy. And since then, I have attended pretty much every conference at the FDA, the NIH, and an Ultragenics boot camp that is held twice a year. I was then fortunate enough to meet Dr. Stephen Gray and Dr. Xin Shen, who I coerced into making a gene therapy for my son and the other children, and our journey then began at that point in time. We then realized that even if we sold everything that we had, our home, our shirts on our back, we didn't have enough money to make the therapy, so we started doing events, galas, golf tournaments, bowling events. I did a bike ride from Toronto to Ottawa. As you can tell, I'm not a type of guy you ride a bike, right? 400 kilometers. And we were able to raise $4.5 million, which allowed us to not have to worry about the funding that we needed in order for us to get this drug to the next step. Thanks to the amazing work of hundreds of people from around the world, doctors, scientists, and 20,000 donations, we received Health Canada approval on December 30th, 2021, and my beautiful boy was treated on March 24th of 2022, thanks to the amazing work of again, hundreds of people from around the world. At that point in time, I decided that I wanted to just give this program away. I wanted to be an executive at Amazon. I wanted to worry about how we're going to take care of Michael when I'm gone from this earth, and no one would take on the program. At 100 kids in the world, I went to the NIH, I went to companies, and I said, take this on. Here's a license, here's drug product. I don't, just take this on. I just can't do this. I'm not the right person for this. And no one would take it on. They were like, it's too rare, no one wants this. And I decided at that point in time that we had to help save the other children. So we applied to the FDA, and we received approval on August 11th of 2022, and we have since treated 8 children. We then realized that even if we got these 8 children treated, we'd be doing a disservice if we didn't get the drug into all the children. So I was fortunate enough to have an amazing person named Javier Garcia, who at the time owned Virogen and was able to get my son treated and make more doses for free. And he was doing a soccer tournament in Spain. And I went to him and I said, I have this crazy idea. Let's open this company up and let's try to save children from around the world with different diseases that no one wants to take on. These ultra rare, unviable programs that no one wants. And he said, let's do it. And he gave us $500,000 to $1 million. We started Alpida Therapeutics. And thanks to my amazing team who's in this room, keeps me going and keeps me aligned and makes sure that we are an amazing company, an amazing group, we were able to start the company. And basically what we're doing now is we're a clinical social purpose corporation based out of California. Our goal is to take on ultra-rare conditions that no one wants, specializing in neurodevelopmental diseases, and use precision medicine to change the lives of these children and move them from proof of concept, doesn't matter where they are, proof of concept, toxicology, manufacturing, and ensure that these programs get approved, not just into the clinic, but all the way to approval. And if you look at our pipeline today, we have SPG 50, which is my son's disease. We've treated 8 children in a phase 1/2 in Dallas, Texas. We have approval from the FDA for a phase 3 with commercial product made. We then received $5 million from the state of California from CIRM and took on CMT4J. We did a toxicology program for that, made plasmid, and got approval from the FDA for a phase 1/2 on that program as well. And then we took on 4 programs unofficially. We call them lifeline programs that companies have dropped or no one wants, and we had to decide to move those forward, again, through a phase 1/3 or a pivotal study to get them approved. And again, it doesn't matter where they're coming in on. They could be coming in from academia, from a company that's being dropped, from toxicology. It really doesn't matter. As long as they're in this pipeline, we're going to take it on no matter where it is. And if you look at the process, going from a proof of concept into the clinic is daunting. It's a big task. Don't get me wrong. It's huge. But that's not where we have a problem. Getting into the clinic, where there's 2,500 clinical trials right now, the FDA is very supportive. There's a process. You prove in a mouse it works. You do safety studies. You make the drug. You get into the clinic. Our problem is going from starting your clinical trial to approval. That's the massive feat because there's so many of these items you have to correct. You have to have an endpoint that works. You have to have a drug that's working. And then you have to show it all working together. And if your disease is a slowly progressing disease like Michael's, it could take 5 to 7 years before you have enough efficacy to get there. Meanwhile, kids are born every week, every month, every day, calling you up saying, my child deserves better. And they do. Our children deserve better. So that's the biggest problem. That's what we're trying to resolve. And if you look at it, it costs about $1.3 billion for a biotech to take on a program to approval, and about 90% of those fail. And that's one of the biggest problems that we have in the industry today. And if you look at the harsh realities, and I'm thankful for everybody that came up and did all the hard work and presented all the stories and all the things, because I'm going to talk about the hardships of what we're going through. So today, in our state today, grants are very, very, very competitive and hard to come by. Venture capitalism is dead for the biotech industry. Unless you have an amazing disease or an amazing therapy, or your disease is more than 100 people in the world, maybe 3, 5, 10,000, it's extremely difficult to get venture capital. Vendors are struggling themselves. So when you go to them and you say, give me a 30%, 50% discount, they're less likely to do that because they're struggling on their own. Institutions and hospitals lost overhead. A lot of them are $1 billion in deficit than they were last year. KOLs and labs are losing staff, and leadership changes are laying off people at the FDA who were supporting us in driving innovation forward. But the reality is technology exists to treat most of these diseases, and we're failing as an industry. We're failing these children that deserve better. And if you look at the lessons learned, what we need to do is we need to start figuring out how do we do adaptive trial designs? How do we go from a single clinical trial to an approval? How do we go from a biomarker or a surrogate endpoint to approval? How do we backload costs? So if you take a trial and you do a phase 1/3 or 1/2, and then you have to make a commercial grade product, if you did that all up front, you're going to spend $15 million or $20 million making that drug product. But if all you're trying to do at the beginning is just to prove it works, why am I going to waste $20 million up front? Let's try to backload those costs to the very end when the FDA absolutely needs them, not at the very front when you're struggling to make it. We need to be flexible on positive endpoints. Today, if you have a primary endpoint that fails and then you have a secondary or third endpoint that does pass, the FDA makes you go back to the beginning. It's like Monopoly. You go to prison and you go back to the beginning. We shouldn't have to do that. If you show efficacy on another endpoint, you should get approval. We should be doing iterative manufacturing process. So today, when you manufacture your program or your disease, you're locked in. That's it. Whatever you did is your locked in process. Your product is your process. And that might cost $1 million a dose. But if we slightly modify it, we might be able to get from, let's say, 8 doses to 25 doses, and bringing that cost down from, let's say, $300,000 or $500,000 to, say, $10,000 or $100,000. So now instead of drugs being $1 million or $3 million, we could bring it down to $250,000 or $500,000. These are the kind of things that we have to get creative and we have to adapt, or else we're never going to get all these other diseases into the pipeline. And then one thing that we've been doing a lot is utilizing retains. So today, about 45% of your drug product is stored in a freezer that eventually expires and goes bad, and it's used just in case something goes wrong so they can go back and they can look at it. What we're doing is we're pulling those retains out of the freezer before they expire and giving them to kids, and that's saving, on average, between $500,000 and $1 million. And then when you think about all the naming convention, accelerated, expedited, exceptional, rapid, it shouldn't matter. It should be, we need a faster path for ultra-rare conditions to approval, right? It doesn't matter what it's called. We need to turn traditional thinking on its head. We need to think differently in order for us to get things into the clinic so that we're not just helping the next generation of children, we're helping this generation as well. Because that's what we want. We want to help save our kids. And we need more funding models like the PRV sooner. I'm not sure if people know, but the priority review voucher was one of the major funding models that happened that was allowing small industries like ours to move programs forward. And unfortunately, it went away. And I'm going to talk about that in a minute. So when you think about the hardships, in-kind funding, we had about $20 million of in-kind funding when I started Alpida Therapeutics. As the years went on, that all went away. Then we were told that if we were able to make a gene therapy 5, 6 years ago, that investors would invest immediately in a gene therapy if you got it further along. That went away. CIRM, a group in California that funds rare disease, had a change in leadership, and they decided that rare diseases were not their priority anymore, so that funding mechanism went away. And then the most drastic changes in our community happened starting December of last year when the PRV wasn't renewed. And that was a drastic hit for all of us. Thankfully, it should come back, but no one really knows at this point in time. Then the NIH got defunded with the new administration, overheads were reduced, and then we lost Peter Marks and 3,500 staff members at the FDA. So unfortunately, I would love to come up and say that our model works, but it's been very much challenging along the way. We've had to adapt, we've had to overcome, and I think when we talk about how do you move things forward, it's being adaptable, it's being nimble, it's being able to adapt in these hardships, in these moments. And the way we did it was, we had 6 programs that were funded by academic institutions and venture philanthropy, and we decided that we have 2 choices. Either we hand the programs off to institutions, which no one would take on, we fail as a company, and we let these programs just fall away like everybody else did, or we adapt. And the way we adapted was we took on consultancy, and we consulted for 6 programs, took on double the work, and decided that we were going to take on not only the 6 programs that we're running today, but we're going to take on 6 more to make sure we stay alive, we're self-funded until times get better, and we can come back to a model that may work. And at the end of this, my whole process and my story is around never giving up. When I'm not a scientist, I'm not a doctor, I'm nothing really. I'm just a guy that doesn't give up. And I think that if you take that model on and you say that no matter what happens in my journey, I'm going to make sure that these children get treated, you will ultimately be successful, because you're never going to give up. And that's what I hope everybody takes away from today, is that it's hard, it's not easy, just don't ever give up. Thank you.
Thank you, Terry. And our last speaker before the panel is Claire Booth.
Great. Well, thank you very much. Thanks for inviting me to come and talk about this. I come from a slightly different perspective, but I just want to acknowledge now really the inspirational talks from the people who've spoken before me, but the practical and useful advice that they've given to everybody. And this is a difficult time that we're working in, but for me anyway, working in this space has really restored my faith in humanity when you hear stories like this. And so, yeah, I actually think it's a great place to be working. I'm a physician, scientist, I'm a pediatric immunologist and transplanter by trade, and a gene therapist now. And I'm going to talk a bit about the European perspective on some of the initiatives that we sort of looked at over there that may be relevant over here. So not just focusing on Great Ormond Street Hospital where I work, but also some other things that are coming through. So these are my disclosures. I do some ad hoc consulting for companies. I'm an investigator for both academically and commercially sponsored companies. And I'll talk about the Agora Foundation a little bit later. So I don't need to tell this audience, but this is essentially the problem that we're facing, particularly at the other end of the pipeline, that we have got these effective therapies that have been proven in clinical trial for ultra-rare diseases, but they're not reaching patients in need for non-medical reasons. And so despite over 150 clinical trials in ultra-rare diseases, we have only a handful of licensed therapies. And then even once they're licensed, it's not a given that those are going to be able to reach patients. So this is the drugs that were approved by the EMA, which is the European Medicines Agency, over this time period, advanced therapies. So what's really promising is that you can see more and more of these advanced therapies and gene therapies coming forwards. But what we've started to see and what's worrying is the white boxes, which is products that have been withdrawn from the market or the marketing authorization hasn't been renewed, again, for non-medical reasons. And even once something's approved, this is just a snapshot, a slide given to me from Julio Delgado in Hospital Clinic Barcelona. So these are approved CAR T-cell therapies for various forms of hematological cancer. They're approved and available in many areas of the world. But this is just the European countries. And what you can see is that actually, even if they're approved, it doesn't mean that your patients are going to access it. And you can see the wide disparity of access in this particular field. So this isn't something where, this isn't necessarily a rare disease, and I'm pretty sure most of us are working in ultra-rare diseases. So I think we face an even bigger challenge. So there are obvious barriers, which is cost, and we've heard about how we can reduce some of those costs, and I think this will be possible. But what I've also wanted to just kind of draw attention to here is that these are the available therapies for some rare diseases. So Zolgensma, a therapy for SMA, those are the cost prices in pounds, euros, and dollars, because that therapy is available in all of those territories. But there are some drugs that aren't available in specific areas of the world, so we have a real disparity of equality. And I just want to draw attention to an example, which was Bluebird Bio that developed a lentiviral gene therapy for ALD and also for a hematological condition. This was a therapy that was developed in Europe, trialed in Europe, given marketing authorization in Europe, but then withdrawn from the European market because they couldn't agree a financial consensus with payers there. So now these therapies are available in the US and not to other markets like Europe. Similarly, Orchard Therapeutics, it founded its whole program based on ultra-rare immune deficiencies, developed in academia, trialed in Europe, etc. And again, they've withdrawn their program, and that's mostly what I'm going to talk about. So I work in the area of ultra-rare inborn errors of immunity, and in the past 4 years, we've seen several gene therapy products that have been proven positive effects in clinical trial that have been dropped by commercial manufacturers. And so we really felt amongst the community that to achieve sustainable and affordable access to these life-changing therapies, we needed some evolution of the system rather than necessarily a revolution. And we started to look whether there are alternatives to the conventional commercialization model. We're not trying to be competitive in any way. If drug companies want to develop something for these therapies, fantastic. But there are going to be areas of need which won't be met in that way. And this is just a snapshot. So this is just in my field of inborn errors of immunity, all ultra-rare diseases, usually affecting less than 1 in a million patients, live births, sorry. And this just really shows you what this represents actually is decades of research, millions of pounds, euros, dollars in public funding, and actually for those things that have reached a clinical trial, often very tangible patient impact. So we really have a responsibility, to continue to work and get these therapies to patients. So we started to ask ourselves, how do we get the currently effective therapies to patients, but also how do we change things so that we can continue to develop and deliver new cures? And I think Terry really kind of summed up the challenges that we're facing at the moment. We can't secure funding for some of these things because there's no commercial viability and there's no exit strategy. So they're very difficult to get investment in this area. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about the journey of the Telethon Foundation, and these slides have been given to me by Stefano Benvenuti from there. So the San Raffaele Institute and the Telethon Foundation is an Italian initiative, which is funded by public money generally. And they have been creators of really effective gene therapies for over 20 years now. And so they have now taken on marketing authorization and moving some of these therapies through to the clinic. And I'm going to tell you the story with their permission of one of these. So there was a gene therapy called Stronvelis, which was a gamma retroviral gene therapy for a really rare form of bubble boy disease called ADA SCID. And this was a program that had been developed by the academics there. It was granted EMA orphan designation in 2005 and then FDA orphan drug designation in 2009. We're seeing positive results of clinical trials coming out here. And then GSK took on the program from San Raffaele and the Telethon Foundation to take that forward to marketing authorization and to get it to patients. It was approved in the EU in 2016 and approved in various countries for being reimbursed. And then in 2016, so this was all under the sort of ownership of GSK. And then in 2018, GSK stepped out of the rare disease, in that sort of rare disease area, and handed over the marketing authorization to Orchard Therapeutics, which had been born out of academic institutions. But unfortunately, then Orchard abandoned that promising gene therapy and gave the program back to the Telethon Foundation, who have become the first charity in the world to hold a manufacturing and distribution rights for an approved gene therapy. And they're really working on a sustainable model of market access for these therapies and hopefully other things coming through a pipeline, and really have pioneered an alternative to industry when there's no other way to get these treatments to patients, because if we have got these effective treatments, we have to get them to patients. And then similarly at Great Ormond Street Hospital, we've been looking at whether we can do a similar thing within the UK structure with the MHRA as well. And using a rare disease, again, a lentiviral gene therapy for ADA SCID, looking at that as an exemplar, whether we can develop a pipeline for advanced therapies that can be delivered in a not-for-profit way for really ultra-rare diseases. And we're talking about diseases where you might be treating 2 to 3 patients in a country per year. So we were funded by LifeArc and the Great Ormond Street Hospital charity to come up with an exploratory project to look at whether this would at all be possible. And so Karen Oprick has taken this on, and we started at the end of last year, but really looking at these 4 parallel work streams that you need to keep going at the same time. So GMP, we have our own GMP facility at Great Ormond Street Hospital. We have to look at how we can make that into a commercial grade facility. Stream looking at how you become a marketing authorization holder and doing gap analyses to look at what's required for those regulatory submissions. Talking about with the reimbursement strategies, NHS England and the HTA approval process to ensure patient access at the end of it, and also looking at developing a business model that will allow sustainable, some sustainability to this pipeline. So whilst we want to be able to deliver these therapies at a not-for-profit model, we also do want to be able to reinvest to secure the pipeline for future academically developed gene therapies. And I think we at Great Ormond Street are in a really unique position because we've got this excellent candidate drug product and we have our own GMP facility, so we don't have to rely on a CDMO or other sort of commercial organization to provide that. I've just been really amazed by the support that we've been offered and given throughout this process. So many people wanting to help to make this work and develop the pipeline so we can secure things in the future. And so then on a more broad kind of European sort of scale, in 2022, I founded a foundation with some colleagues in Europe called Agora Foundation, which is Access to Gene Therapy for Rare Diseases. So we were really focused on the post-licensing area for these treatments that we'd seen come through, seen been effective, seen them transform patients' lives, and then they were stuck. So our mission initially was to facilitate access to effective gene therapies for the treatment of patients with ultra-rare diseases across Europe. And so these were the partners that we were working with. All of these partners have been involved in developing and delivering these clinical products, and many have been involved in the whole process of drug development as well. And we also had as a founder member IPOPI, which is the International Patient Organization for Primary Immune Deficiencies, and this is one of the sort of areas that have been hardest hit by the disinvestment in the area. So in September 2022, we set out with a really very retrospectively ambitious and crazy aim of facilitating sustainable access to these effective therapies for the treatment of patients with inborn errors of immunity and inborn errors of metabolism, because this was the lowest hanging fruit. This is where we had the kind of proven products. In the short term, we wanted to understand how to make these effective therapies actually available to patients. And then we had this crazy goal at the time of a long-term goal of creating an independent, sustainable, not-for-profit entity which could support the marketing authorization, the delivery, and access to these therapies across Europe. So we had our first meeting in London in 2022, and we brought together 50 people from around Europe and the world to represent different stakeholder perspectives and look forward for solutions. So we had academic developers, we had patients, we had regulators from MHRA and EMA, we had funders, and we also had commercial partners who were in the process of drug development as well. And we published the results of those of that kind of workshop, just highlighting some of the areas that we'd focused on. And we went on to found the Agora Foundation, which is a not-for-profit registered in the Netherlands. And this is our sort of executive board and supervisory board. But basically, these are all people who have been inherently involved in developing and delivering these therapies for patients or representing patients. And actually, we're an independent group of international partners. So we think that we can offer a quite unique perspective on this and also be able to lobby for change in a more independent way. So we've tried to focus on a few areas, but we understand that throughout this whole process, as many of the speakers before have said, if you can reduce repetition in this process, you can reduce costs by data sharing across different programs. You can de-risk, which is a much more, to give regulatory agencies and HTA agencies some confidence that the product that you're putting in front of them will be safe and effective. We're looking to drive change in the regulatory framework area and also transnational recognition of approvals, which is a big issue in Europe, but also developing a network of expert centers that will be able to deliver those therapies without additional infrastructure costs. Also setting up data repositories to, again, share data and de-risk and streamline some of the safety assays, which are hugely expensive to do in this area, and also looking at education and lobbying, but looking at also harmonization of all of the pan-European national activities, which is no mean feat, it turns out. So really, we wanted to focus on what happens after licensing and getting those therapies to patients, because there have been a lot of initiatives in the pre-licensing valley of death, and hopefully we'll see some results from that. But our sort of structure is relatively simple. You have an academic institution or hospital that has developed a specific therapy. They're the marketing authorization holder. They're the centralized manufacturing center, and they're responsible for post-marketing surveillance. But there will be hospitals and institutions in other countries that will want to access that therapy, but they may not have the financial resources to be able to support setting up that infrastructure, applying for the regulatory approvals, and also the HTA assessments. And so we see Agora really acting as a kind of middle person to help with infrastructure and site readiness, to help with national regulatory submissions by sharing templates. These are quite iterative. It's quite easy to change them between the different countries. HTA engagement, patient communities, and we hope that by work sharing, we'll be able to set up more centers to be able to deliver these therapies. Ultimately, this is what we're looking for, sustainable access to these therapies. So by providing not-for-profit advanced therapy manufacture, we can then offer a favorable cost-benefit analysis against standard treatments, which will support reimbursement by the payers, and then we can continue with this cycle. And this isn't a slide to be read, but this is just to highlight that there are many different areas that we've looked at trying to focus on, and we're really trying to identify what is the lowest hanging fruit to be able to move forward. And in the context of Europe, we're really focused on cross-border collaboration. So what have we done in the meantime? It is a slower process, I think, than we were imagining. We focused on trying to implement or support some regulatory changes. We had a meeting at the beginning of last year where we explored some scientific alignment and regulatory convergence across different regulatory agencies. Again, it was very, it's interesting discussions and very promising, but to actually get some tangible outputs from that is a challenge. We've continued to engage with EMA, specifically now focusing on 2 areas where we think that we can institute some change. So comparator data, it is extremely costly to do natural history studies for these conditions. We often have data available through registries, which may not be of a granular level that's currently accepted by regulatory agencies, but talking about pragmatic sort of pragmatic approvals in this case. We're also looking at how we can actually find the true real-world costs of comparator standard treatments, because I think that's something that actually these gene therapies could be cost-effective in the long run, even though they might have a high upfront price. And also we now in Europe have a joint HTA stakeholders network with the idea that we can then streamline the process across the different countries. So we're getting involved in that to lobby from a patient perspective. So many organizations and people have been helping us to get to this point so far, and I just want to thank them. But hopefully this has just given you an idea of some other initiatives and kind of pathways that we're looking at over in Europe.
All right, what a great session of 6 different speakers. We're now going to invite all of them to come up to the stage, and we're going to have a panel discussion, and we have about 45 minutes for our panel. So we would like to ask any participants in the room to come to the mics in the center aisle to ask questions of our panelists. Mic's on? Yeah, okay, there they go. All right, so I'm gonna just get us started real quick while the rest of you get up your courage. And one of the words that Terry mentioned that I wrote down was nimble. So I want to ask those of you who would like to respond to this, what internal structures or mindsets have helped you remain nimble in this often unpredictable developmental landscape? And second part to that question, can you share an example of a time that your organization had to pivot, maybe kind of quickly, to keep a therapy or a program on track, and what has helped you to adapt during these times? So that's kind of open to anyone in the panel that wants to chime in.
I'm happy to kind of start that, but from maybe a slightly turning it around a different perspective. That I think for us, we have to put pressure on the regulatory agencies and the fund and the sort of reimbursement agencies. They're the ones who need to be nimble in this area, and they're the ones who need to be adaptive to the current situation. And so we feel that we're in a position to be able to kind of lobby for that, because we can be as nimble as we want and we can adapt to the current constantly changing landscape. But ultimately, we have to get through those hurdles of regulatory approval and payment. And so I feel like we can only go so far as kind of, companies. We have to lobby for a bigger vision change.
We can go down the line, I guess. I think from that perspective, as a patient advocacy group who's on the drug development side, I think being nimble and flexible is the key to success and timelines. Nothing is ever what you think it's going to be, and nothing is ever as simple as you anticipate it's going to be. And therefore, I can give, most of my examples are in the drug development space of IND enabling studies, where you go in with candidate 101 and you wind up in candidate 108. And if you're not ready to pivot and make a change because there's evidence of tox, or there's evidence of, it looks great in a cell line, but it does not look great in the animal model, and you have to change your clinical candidate, you better be prepared to do that. And while you're doing that, you have to change your candidate on the CMC side. So the manufacturing side has to change. And, manufacturing you can have an entire 4-hour session on the challenges of manufacturing. Where you start is never where you end. And what they tell you is going to happen is never what happens. And you will have to pivot in many ways during a manufacturing campaign, because it never turns out the way everyone wants it to turn out. And so you have to make changes along the way. And I think from a nonprofit venture philanthropy perspective, we are very lean. And because we're lean, we have a layer of 3 to 6 people that make decisions. When you're in a company and you have layers of hundreds of people that need to make decisions with red tape and bureaucracy, that it has to kind of trickle its way down to decision making, it has to trickle its way up for decisions to come down, that can take 3 months to make a decision, where we can make a decision in 3 minutes on a phone call to say, we have to change candidates, call CMC, call this, do that, and now let's move. And because of that, we can get through an IND in 13 months. But what company can get through an IND in 13 months from declaring clinical candidate to filing your IND? Very few. And so I think it's because we're small, because we're mission-driven and focused with the right people around the table, you can make decisions and be nimble in a way that actually serves you very, very well. I think it's a lot harder when you're in a bigger institution, or if you're working in a bigger company.
I would just double down on second, third, and fourth what Allison said, and what you said, Terry, on nimble teams. I'm a big believer from a management perspective of lean teams. We say we punch above our weight class, and it is about decision making, but I actually believe it's about innovation. Diverse teams in every sense of the word, of a small group of people can move really quick, but also be encouraged to be supported and be accountable. And so when people talk about EB Research Partnership, and I say we have 5 full-time staff members, people are surprised. But there's a great thinker in the nonprofit space named Dan Pelota, and one of the most watched TED Talks is called "The Way We Think About Nonprofits is Dead Wrong." And his principle is, do you like your iPhone? Yes. Do you want your car to be safe? Yes. Do you say you should pay Apple's employees and Toyota as little as possible, burn them out and cycle through? No. So things like curing a disease, I'm a believer of find the best people, pay them more than they expected, and you can accomplish a lot more with lean teams. One just other example to your point about being nimble, the pandemic taught us a lot. And for everybody in this room in drug development or venture philanthropy or foundations, guess what? We can run clinical trials really quickly. And in our space, what we learned is that patients and families want to contribute data. They want to be a part of the ecosystem, but it's about aligning incentives. And a lot of times there's not trust between the patient communities and biotech and pharma, and sometimes they're academic medical centers. So we created a system high in patient trust, and we didn't think about doing at-home genomic sequencing kits, but we had to, right? It's a pandemic. Are we going to let research just stop? No, the families don't stop, disease progression doesn't stop. So we started asking ourselves questions of what can we do, and it forced us to think outside the box and work with a company called GeneDx to devise. We just asked them, have you ever done at-home genomics? We haven't really thought about it. Let's try it. And now that's the standard of care that we use. That was just being nimble, being quick, being reactive, and being able to make decisions quick with super lean teams.
Yeah, I mean, from the very beginning, being nimble and pivoting is exactly what we had to do. I mean, we did a hackathon. We thought, we were going to have hundreds of people come. It was 2 days after the pandemic. No one showed up. We were working with a hospital to get our gene therapy into my son, and the hospital had other ulterior motives. We had to drop them and move out to a different hospital. I think in this journey that you're going to be going on or on, just like Allison said, nothing's going to go right, everything's going to go wrong, and you have to just pivot and move and adapt and just say, you know what, things happen, and we just have to just move on. That's it. You just can't look back. You look forward.
Yeah, I will just double down on the lean team. I talk to foundations that make decisions through their boards, and I don't understand it. It takes so long. You have to move super fast. And so I actually had a biotech CEO ask me, who went through our program, how were we able to move so quickly with such a small team? And my response to him was, we have a small team. You should fire half your staff. You'll move a lot faster. So it is, it's just empower people to make decisions. They may fail. We've had failures, but it'll cost you less, and less time will be wasted in the long run. The whole board making every decision, it will slow everything down.
Do you have a question? Go ahead.
For those of you who said get out of academia, I feel that so deeply this year for various reasons. But I also feel the conflict of, in academia, you kind of get with it, like often a GMP manufacturing facility, regulatory people. And I feel like the non-academic world also has some bad actors. Mm-hmm. How did you decide who to work with in the non-academic space and build a team that sort of comes with those other aspects that academia brings?
Yeah, so I said that, and I know it's controversial. It's not that, everyone's here is working with academia, and there's a lot of good in academia. What I learned, at least this is our experience, and again, we're a small, we have 700 patients, we don't have a lot of funds, we can't make mistakes. We just don't have that ability, and we can't waste time. The thing with academia is that postdocs generally are very creative, and drug development isn't actually all that creative. Like, there's very specific things you have to do that technicians tend to do, and there's a process to drug development, and academics don't like processes. So therein kind of lies some of the difficulties. Also in academia, unless you're Angelman and you're paying a lot of money, your project isn't a high priority, and timelines are never met. And so there's just a lot of those things that happen. And most academics have never taken a drug to approval. And again, unless you've done that, you don't really understand drug development. In non-academia, we spent a lot of time looking for a partner, and our team actually chose Charles River, even though some of our advisors told us not to do both tox and drug development, because we found a team that was really passionate about what we were doing and wanted to partner with us to prove that a nonprofit, a small one, could actually run a clinic. We're sponsoring our own clinical trial. We're actually the first foundation that I know of that will be sponsoring our first clinical trial and going to approval. And with Charles River, it went all the way to the top. So I, met with their chief commercial officer. Like, the company is literally invested. I did an all hands for their entire company. Like, they're so invested. And I think when you're irrelevant, which we are, if you're an ultra rare condition, you have to get, it's like an emotional connection. For our for our CRO, we're actually working with IQVIA, which I would have never guessed we would do. And it's because, again, we found a team that is so passionate. They're going to go above and beyond to make sure that we succeed, and those are the things that we really looked for. But I will say the single biggest source of our success was actually hiring someone, and I wish I had done this earlier, that I had the guts to pay for this person earlier from pharma to run our program, and that's really made all the difference.
I'll just make a quick comment about the academic piece. I think it's a little hyperbole, right? We all started every one of our programs in academia. Academia has so much value. And we fund over 95 research grants. 90 of them are with academics. And so we have so much respect and value and need for academic institutions to do a lot of the discovery work. The key is not get out of academia because you shouldn't work with them. The key is partnering with academia to know when it's time to take the activities that they so clearly discovered and have so much love and compassion for, and know when it gets outside of their wheelhouse and capacity and know-how, because they sometimes don't know, right? Neuroscience, I'm talking neuro because my daughter has a neurologic disease, but neuroscientists don't know how to develop drugs usually. Some of them do. Neurologists don't know how to develop drugs, but they want to treat the patients desperately. And then there's this valley of death where a neuroscientist needs to meet neurologist. That's what they don't know how to do. That's where getting out of the academic institution, developing the drug, and then bringing it back to the academic institution in which the clinical trials will likely be run, not always, but most of the time. That's the key, and keeping them part of the story along the way. So people that we take the license from, they're from academia. They were very involved in our CRO work to get our ASO into the clinic. Very, very involved. But they weren't the ones making the decisions because they didn't know how. They have to be humble enough to realize what they don't know, and most of them are, but not all of them. And so it's really important that you surround yourselves with the right people and you keep them along for the ride, because this is their baby too. The drug is their baby, not your child. And so it's really a collaboration, and I think when it all can meet together, it's perfect. Not everyone is Claire, right, where she could do both ends. That's very, very rare. And when you can have that, that's amazing, but most of us don't have that. So we have to fill the gap. And that gap is generally out of an academic institution. You can hire regulatory consultants. You can hire toxicology consultants, chemistry consultants. But you need somebody who knows the pieces you need, right? Academics do, but they take a lot of time. We have regulatory at Yale University, for example, and they are at a different pace than regulatory is when you're working with a CRO or if you have a regulatory person on your staff. So you have to be a little bit nimble, so to speak, about how you do it.
So I love academic institutions. We try to work exclusively with them up to a certain point, and then we have to come to Jesus and say, this is where you stop, and this is where we continue on. Allison hit the nail on the head exactly with what I was about to say. I would just add one small piece, is that you have to make sure that you find an institution that is committed to your program, that is not in it for their career, and will bulldoze you in order for their career over saving kids. And I would say like 99.9% of the researchers I work with are in it to save the kids. That 0.01% that's out there for their career, stay away from them. Drop them. They're toxic individuals. You do not want to work with them. But that's very few of them that are out there.
And I would just add one specific example, agree with what everyone said, but I think it's also about creating win-win scenarios, right? We've got academics, we've got patient foundations, we've got biotech and pharma, we've got regulators. Everybody has the same goals, but the roads are different, right? And when we built the first oncology longitudinal data set in myeloma, so often we all get into our corners and say they think that, we think this, but the power of conversations and trying to get roundtables and simple meetings where you get these groups together, we asked the academics, why don't you want to share data between institutions? And they said, well, we want to publish, so we need a 5-year lockup. And we said, what if we create a system where you publish as a consortium, patients get that data back in real time, de-identified, we form a pre-competitive consortium of biotech and pharma, and that led to 10 FDA approvals in multiple myeloma in a decade, right? Academics were happy they published more as a consortium and a group on a shared data set than they would have before. We saw drug approvals and patients got the data back. So I think really sometimes just stepping stepping out of our corners and being like, wait, let's ask questions. What are the win-win scenarios to try to align incentives and create new models?
That was a really great question. All right, we'll take the next question.
Hi, Andrew Longnecker here. I'm curious, lots of I think structural benefits happening in the space, the science, showing that it can work. Many of you spoke to this. Citizen working on enabling. It occurs to me though, and it feels like we're at a bit of a trough in the hype cycle, and Tara, you kind of touched on this a little bit. I'm curious on other panelists' thoughts, just from a ecosystem perspective, question one. Question two, does it matter for the people in the room where we are in the hype cycle? Every disease and experience is unique, maybe is independent from the broader ecosystem hype cycle. I'm just kind of curious on those two sides, what you all think.
So I'll quickly talk about the trough, the low level we're in. It's a great opportunity if you have a program that's out of proof of concept, because CMC manufacturing are desperate for people to start doing manufacturing. Toxicology companies are hurting as well. So if you have a program that you need to get into the clinic or move forward, all the CMOs, all the CDMOs are looking for work, for business. So it's a perfect opportunity for you to negotiate and get amazing rates. It's just that when you get out of that perspective and you try to move it forward and you hand it off to someone, that's where it gets difficult. But it's a great time right now if you need to run a program forward.
Yeah, I think it depends where you are. To your point, if you're in early research and discovery, we've had more grants submitted to us in the last 9 weeks since the NIH cuts happened than we've had in the last 5 years, because all of the academic institutions are now worried they're not getting funded from the NIH, and so every Angelman researcher is thinking the foundation is going to be our savior. So we are now able to see much more of it and be more critical and be really careful and have our hands in a lot more of the things we can fund. If you have a nonprofit money that has not been touched, and you have some savings in your nonprofit world where you can be funding research, our research funding has not been really affected tremendously. Now we have brokerage accounts which are dramatically affected, but ultimately, because all of our money from our IND enabling studies to our early preclinical discovery programs are all being funded by the foundation, which is money that's secure and safe and has been earmarked, we're okay. We're running our IND enabling studies, we're running our clinical trial, we're not really impacted dramatically. Now, we are gonna need to partner these programs with industry. When we get to a point in which we need industry to come in and take over these programs, in 2019, we had our choice of what industry partner we wanted for our ASO. Whether it was VC or pharma, everyone wanted a piece of Angelman. Now, it's probably, we haven't started trying to bring in money yet, but when we do, I suspect it's gonna be a lot harder. Now, maybe in 3 or 4 years it won't be. So I think it depends if you're looking for outside investment, if you have stable money within your foundation as a nonprofit, if you're at an academic institution, less touched by the NIH, maybe they're in a better situation. So it depends on where your funding comes from and if you're looking for donations and who they're from, because some people, they're not as impacted as others. So I think it really depends.
Okay, next question.
Hi, I'm Catherine Heldy. I'm a rare mom and scientist, and I'm the CSO at SYNGAP Research Fund. We don't own any of our therapeutics, so there's different pharma companies that have a SYNGAP therapeutic in their pipeline, but we're trying to de-risk trials for all of them. Do you guys have any advice on the biomarkers and endpoints? So we spend money on this, and we have a lot of ideas of what could be good biomarkers or endpoints, but I'm still not exactly clear on how you get approval to use them. So validation, all these steps. So do you have a?
Yeah, I probably have the most experience on that from a patient advocacy perspective here. You may have some as well. But we have similar disorders, so I know where you're coming from. So it's not a matter of getting regulatory buy-in as a nonprofit or as a consortium of a biomarker and outcome measure consortium or group. It's more a matter of regulatory path. So what is your disease concept model? What are the endpoints that are meaningful to your community? Obviously going to be things like communication, behavior, sleep, seizures, and on and on. What is the regulatory path of each of those areas in which there has been approval for another disorder in a endpoint that has regulatory buy-in. It has been validated. For example, the Bailey Scale of Infant and Toddler Development, worst scale on the entire planet, but regulators love it. So our kids hate it, our families hate it, and it does not measure the capabilities of our children, but it moves in clinical trials. The regulatory agencies love it, and it's an easy path to an approval if it moves. So therefore, suck it up, use it, because if you develop your own cognitive measure, we developed our own communication measure, the ORCA, which looks amazing to populations that are nonverbal or minimally verbal. Except the regulators, we've now been at it for 7 years, and the regulators still have not qualified it because they need to see phase 3 data, placebo-controlled data, to compare against it to detailed data in other clinical trials to understand how it behaves compared to the Bailey. So at the end of the day, making your own measures for different domains is, in my opinion, an utter waste of time, unless there's absolutely nothing you can utilize that can show something in your disease area. And you have to think about every domain in that way. What is the best sleep measure? What is the best seizure measure? Seizure diaries and sleep diaries. We were told by the FDA, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. They may be really not sophisticated, but they work and we like them. So stop creating sleep measures and new devices and new this and new that. Think about the regulatory path that has approval and take that and use it in your population in a longitudinal natural history study to see how it behaves in your population, and then create a protocol for a clinical trial in which people can use that, and make sure it's consistent among all of the entities that are running these trials. If they want to be part of your consortium, they have to be able to consistently use the endpoints in which your group of consortium members, clinicians, regulators, and industry all feel is appropriate. And then you can compare apples to apples, and you can move forward. And that's in any disease area, not just neuro, but trying to create your own measures and think you're gonna pull something outside of a box is naive. And we were naive. We spent millions of dollars on measures that we thought were better for Angelman. Just because they're better doesn't mean they're gonna be utilized by the regulatory authorities. So look what's out there first. See if you can get traction in your community with it, that you can measure your kids and measure meaningful change, and then you're gonna have a much faster path. And work with the companies for that, because if you don't own any assets, you're not running any trials, you can't control what they do. But you can work with them to show the value in natural history of how these measures behave in your population.
Yeah, and so a follow-up question, because I've been hanging my hat on the ORCA, so,
Don't.
does it matter for primary versus secondary endpoints?
You don't even need to worry about that until you're in a phase 3 pivotal trial, primary or secondary. Everything is exploratory in phase 1, 2, and you guys aren't even in phase 1, 2 yet. So I wouldn't get ahead of yourself. I would say explore all of the endpoints, including the ORCA, because eventually we'll have an approval that will show the ORCA has great value, and then everyone else will be able to use it right behind. But it's gonna be for us another 3 or 4 years. So for you guys longer, you're not in phase 1, 2 yet. So I would not get ahead of yourself with primary or secondary. Think about the exploratory endpoints, all of which may be able to capture change in your children, and then over time, they'll all pull themselves out. Some will rise to the top, some will dive to the bottom, and that's how your phase 3s are gonna be designed. But the industry will design those, not you.
Great, thank you.
Sure.
Just one thing to add too, because you asked about IP. Let's talk about 3 forms that IP comes in and potential solutions. Every venture investment that we've made actually has no equity position in IP, and I think that's really important to look at for a second. So when it comes to universities, and by the way, I think this was part of your question as well, we don't put a penny out the door without some rights to monetization. So I would advise that to everybody from day one, and happy to talk about solutions, whether it's a $50,000 investment or a $5 million. You can accomplish that with both. But universities, it's a losing battle to take equity in the IP. I would be negotiating contracts 7 years later, right? So the solution is take rights of the monetization when that's monetized in the future or commercialized of that IP, which again, I mentioned it briefly, is a bit semantical, but it's how you get this through tech transfer. Companies, whether you have the IP and you're spinning into the company or you're looking to invest in IP for your disease area, doesn't make any sense. Take shares in the company, and don't just take shares in the company. Put your capital towards your disease group. If they have other assets, take shares in the company at large, because you hope it succeeds in your disease indication. But if one of the other ones succeeds, your shares go up and you can return capital and reinvest back in your disease. And then the last, which probably, I'll be brief because we could have a whole panel on it, is data and data monetization. We believe that patients own their own data. However, there's a real economic value proposition. If I was starting a foundation from day one, it's the only place that I would invest. To Allison's point, before we get to endpoints, before we get to finding biotech and collect broad data sets, longitudinal data, genotype, phenotype, and you can meet any endpoint and be prepared for regulators. But the monetization in rare disease, a CRO for one potential patient for a rare disease clinical trial budgets $50,000 to $200,000 for a potential name. If you have the willing communities that you represent, and you're honest and transparent, and you build that trust, and you have the genomics, and you have the phenotype, that is a very successful business model, and that's before you get to pre-competitive consortiums from industry. So, that's a quick overview. I could go deeper, but just when you think about IP, it comes in those various forms, and there's solutions to all of it.
Just one quick plug. The Patient Outreach Committee tomorrow, to your question about biomarkers, is having a symposium on biomarker use considerations for cell and gene therapy drug development. So tomorrow, Wednesday the 14th at 8 a.m., if you're interested in that topic. Our committee's also putting on that symposium. Okay, we'll take the next question.
Good morning, Dean Sir, MLD Foundation. We are the Len-Meldy, Lib-Meldy folks with the world's most expensive therapy today. I love this discussion, this conversation. I want to generalize a little bit. Our experience has been a little different, and I imagine other groups out here are a little different as well. You all have done a wonderful job of explaining how you, as advocacy, as nonprofits, have created businesses and supported businesses, and again, a lot of people in different positions. I just want to reflect on pivot and be nimble as I was standing up here waiting. We mentioned COVID, we mentioned the economic slump, and now we're in the midst of everything going on in DC and so on. Just be nimble and pivot. We can come through this, and I think we have to do that. We can't just sit on the sidelines, and my final comment's gonna say something about that. We put a lot of energy into getting our gene therapy all the way through the research and clinical trials. Took us 19 years. Hopefully that doesn't take anybody else that long anymore. But we started our diagnostics work just a year or two after that, so we could identify patients. We knew that was going to be a challenge. Relationships with families and your network is really, really critical for that. We've seen, with all respect to all the good things that come out of this, we've seen CROs and a lot of middlemen come in to do work that we can do quicker, easier, and less expensive, and in a more personal way with our community, but in a professional way with our partners. The access and globalization are things we're really looking at right now. The therapies are approved in Europe and they're approved in the US, but what about the rest of the 90% of the world? So we need to be thinking about those things too. FDA approval was wonderful. Last year we had a great party, but now we're back at it. And then the two last bullets here, reimbursement, you gotta be thinking about that as well. How do you build your model, your story, so that you're gonna get reimbursement and build those relationships? Because once again, FDA approval doesn't get you to the patients. It only gets you approval. It's not a rubber stamp. It's a steel stamp, it's a big deal. But, and then my final comment really is an encouragement, and it kind of wraps around a lot of these things. Do what you can. Focus on research if that's what your thing is, or raising money. Do what you can and make all the progress you can, but don't ignore things like policy. How can you engage in just a few minutes a week, engage your community a little bit in policy to have a better path forward for you as we go forward? Just as I was catching emails, I won't say whose presentation I was reading emails during, the FDA, HHS and the FDA are looking for regulatory simplification. They're looking for comments on that. Let's contribute to that. Don't let somebody else do it for you. Everybody's voice matters. Everybody can participate in that. So just an encouragement for everybody to keep on, be nimble, be pivot, be engaged, particularly in policy. This is a unique time in DC and otherwise, and I think we can impact things and take advantage of that as well. But thank you, it's wonderful.
Thank you, Dean.
Hi, I'm Barbara Nack. I'm with the Progeria Research Foundation. So Progeria, ultra rare, 13 kids in the US, 400 globally. We don't have a corporate exit, so nobody will come and take our drug from us. So we're developing it ourselves. My question is about licensing. We're working, we have a gene therapy we're developing. It's CRISPR-based, base editing. We're working with, all the people who own those patents, and it's becoming mind-bogglingly complicated. I'm just interested in the panel here and what you've done to sort of get the licenses in place when you started those discussions. Should you do it early or later? You know, just talk about licensing a little.
I'll start, and I'm sure others have. So we're similar to you. No one's coming to pick. We de-risked. We did everything everyone told us, and no one came in a white cape to license our stuff. So we've had to do all the licensing. I wish I knew what I know now, kind of thing. We did. One of the things we did and Michael, you've talked about this, is the contracts with academia, getting first right of refusal for the IP. Something that I really learned the hard way now is we are now negotiating for that IP as we're taking it forward to develop ourselves, is that we did not negotiate right to prosecute the patent and actually file the patent, and that has become a huge problem for us right now, as well as we didn't really we were very vague in royalties, as well as in all the people that have contributed. So just getting those licenses sorted out now, that the worst time to negotiate a license is when there is an asset of value. So I wish we had done and it's a pain. It's like really painful to negotiate those contracts early on, and you think, I just want to get going, but then it does, it ends up affecting you. Kim might be interesting. I know you're not on the panel, but they're also developing their own gene therapy on taking it forward, and they've dealt with a lot of licensing issues. But it is, I guess my only thing, it is a headache, and once you're licensing, when there's something of value, no one wants to part with it, and it's just a very difficult negotiation at that point.
Okay.
I'm going to give a flip story of that, which is, as we've talked through some of this IP and licensing, there really is a discussion in the ultra rare space of, do you even keep these patents open? Like, should you just let them lapse, right? So I think that space is still evolving in the ultra rare space.
Yeah, completely.
So one thing that we have 5 or 6 assets that we're running. We only have 2 licensed right now. And what we're doing is, as soon as we're able to take on a program and actually do it justice, that's when we'll license the program fully and take it on all the way. But I think you have to definitely protect your asset. If you're working on a program, you need to figure out early on, protect your asset, have right of first refusal, have the ability to have some initial royalty discussions on, because like everybody was saying here, you're not going to get the patent, you're not going to get IP. Right. You're going to get royalties. And you guys have done a great job, by the way. You guys are doing some amazing stuff.
I didn't do it. I've only been with the foundation for about 2 years, so those are the founders.
But still, you're part of the journey, right? So the journey has been amazing, and I think what happens is protect your asset early and make sure that when you get to a point where it has value, that you're not starting off at a lower position and basically begging for them to give you something of reason, but also understanding of where that asset is in the ecosystem. If your disease is 1,000 people, it has a lot less market, appeal than one that has 100,000 patients in the world. So you also have to negotiate that as well within the program.
Yeah, one of the challenges we've had is just even bringing the academic partners to the table, because they're getting nothing from it. We're not going to make any money. They're going to get nothing back. And so they, take months to get back to us.
Well, but it's going to be nothing up front, but you can negotiate something in the return. Like when you guys got your PRP voucher, you can make it so that the next royalty or whatever it is, they will then get a return on investment. Nothing's going to be up front, because you just, unfortunately, most of the time you don't have that, right?
And actually, that's something that we finally got over the hump with our academic partner. They wanted milestone payments, and we're like, how are we going to do that? So we just ended up giving them more of royalties downstream, and that made them happier. So it's figuring out that balance.
And I would just say, deal-making, venture capital, it comes down to 2 things: economics and control. Economics, future rights to monetization, royalty payments, but control, Nasha just gave quickly, which I'm sure she could teach a master class, and many of us could, but first right of refusal, just to quadruple underline her saying that, rights to prosecute IP in the future. And I would just add one more, which is march-in rights, which is really important for you all to think about now, that if you do out-license something, you want to protect so that isn't shelved and sat on by a giant biotech and pharma company without you having a say in that.
And one thing that we also add to most of our assets, almost if not all, and I tell every family foundation to do it, is non-commercial rights. So let's say that a company goes and sells it to someone that you don't like, just open up a phase 1, 2 forever. Treat all the kids under that trial. No one can ever stop you. And you can just keep doing that for as long as you want. If they have no viable, good interest in your children,
Yeah.
then nothing can stop you from doing that. So non-commercial rights is so important in this field.
Yeah, we've definitely put that in. Thank you.
All right, thank you for that. Great question. We have 2 more people lined up and just under 10 minutes left. So let's try to take 2 questions in 10 minutes.
Hi, Zaina Dupay here. I was wondering, can you share your experiences in navigating the regulatory landscape for clinical trials and product approvals? Like, what lessons have you learned that could benefit other advocates?
I'm not sure if it's the same because the whole world of the FDA is completely different. But ours has been a very collaborative experience so far with the FDA. We've asked questions, we've put them out of their their comfort zone, and they've been very, very supportive. But again, we're in a completely different world now. We're not sure what that's going to look like.
I think we can speak on behalf of the US, Canada, and UK mostly, because I think that's where most of our experiences are. But in the US has been the largest amount of experience, and I think it depends if you're talking about CBER or CDER. They're very different, and they hopefully maybe one of the lights at the end of this tunnel of efficiency is that they'll align on how they behave. But CBER has been, at least under the leadership of Peter Marks, we'll see under the new leadership if this changes, which it probably will, has been incredibly easy to work with, and a partner on every level, and has made the idea of moving gene therapies to patients with the greatest needs as easy as he could possibly make it, even though efficiencies are still challenging. We just cleared our IND. It was on time. There were very few questions. It was an easy process, and the FDA was very accommodating to everything we wanted, including pediatric populations, single dose, high dose only, not doing a low and a high dose in order to be able to start low and go slow with a gene therapy. We had enough argument to say we feel strongly that it's 1 dose, it's all ages, and they were very agreeable, which we didn't expect. 5 years ago, you had to start in adults, move down to kids, start at low dose, go to high dose, go lower, go higher, and then a population didn't get the right dose. They were very agreeable. On CDER, on the other side, I just heard another disorder where they were willing to do pre-symptomatic degenerative diseases at CBER for a single treatment gene therapy. CDER said, no way, we're not doing pre-symptomatic. You can only do symptomatic with an ASO, even though it's a repeat dose and it goes away over time. We're not willing to do pre-symptomatic. How does that make much sense in that you should be able to do pre-symptomatic with an ASO, not with a gene therapy, and then if that shows safety, then CBER can come around and say, yeah, pre-symptomatic, it's worth it, it has clinical benefit. That's not what happened. So it depends the reviewers you get, it depends the team that you're under. If you're under neuro, there's a very different mindset than if you're under metabolic or immunology or others. So it really, really depends. It's hard to say that. What you get in a phase 1/2 is also very different than what you get in a phase 3. What you can speak to approvals, because we're not lucky enough to yet have approvals, but once we passed end of phase 2 into phase 3, talking about controlled studies, the conversation is a little harder. We had a really easy conversation as a foundation when we went in for our first pre-IND meeting. When we went in as an industry sponsor, it was a lot harder of a meeting. They really hit hard, and they were a little bit more challenging to work with because they looked at us very differently as a sponsor than they did as a nonprofit. So it really, really depends on how you're going in and what you're going in for, and making sure you have the right regulatory team at the table leading those meetings. A good, strong regulatory team leading those meetings, they go very, very well. When you are going in and you're not clear what you're asking, you're not clear what you want, you don't have real clear solutions to the problems they put in front of you, it's going to be a much harder meeting. And so I hope that answered it a little bit. There's not one size fits all. You could speak to approvals.
Yeah, I would just say quickly, well said by Allison. Going through the approval process for the FDA, it's safety and efficacy, right? We know that. However, with the first approval that we got 2 years ago, we're a skin disease. There was no dermatologist on the FDA review committee. This happens, right? There's 10,000 rare diseases. There can't be an expert in that room. There most often will not be. As a parent, and Allison, Terry, Kim, Nasha, what was a turning point? If it is close, is actually voices, families showing up in those rooms so they understand the burden of the disease and what these families go through on a daily basis. It may be close on safety and efficacy, but when families can convey what this would mean to them and their quality of life and their daily life, it really matters, and that was a turning point from us. Last thing I'll say, and I'll be the one to say it, look, we're facing here in this country unprecedented attack on science, and it's a time to fight for what works and to push back. What works? Terry talked about this. Orphan Drug Act, 1984, handful of rare diseases, drugs approved. Today, half of the drugs approved are rare disease drugs, right? And we've gone from a couple drugs approved in rare disease to over 700 now. And why is that? Because we created a system that incentivized drug approval, which is these vouchers, which is this reimbursement system, which is accelerated approval. So those things we need to fight for when there's so many rare diseases, like many at this table and yourself, that are going to be petitioning the FDA. It's a bandwidth issue, but what can we do to make that safe? Of course, but what can we do to make that more efficient? And I think there's opportunities to evolve the way that we think about medicine in this country too. In the era, we're at a conference for gene and cell therapy, we need to look at multiple guides. So not just one subtype as one gene therapy as one gene editing. So I think some of these things will help. I'll get off my stump for a minute, but I would just go back to patient voices matter, parents' voices matter, and sometimes that can be, in the right way, a turning point.
Yeah, can I just come in on that for the MHRA and EMA a little bit? I think the important thing is to start in a transparent and pragmatic discussion, which our agencies are very open to, bringing patient voice to the table and including in trial design and reported outcome measures for sure. But also having the ability to suggest independent experts in the area to explain, for example, why a single-arm trial is fine for this condition and not a randomized control trial, which is something that has been grappled with. But also, I think we found that in discussions, it's a two-way discussion. So if an agency or somebody says, well, we want this data, explore, well, why do you want that data? What is it going to add? What is it going to show you? And then this is the data that we have, and this is why we think that you don't need what you're asking for. Or similarly say, okay, we didn't quite understand what you were asking for. We get that now, we'll try and do that. So it's really, and that has been very open in MHRA and EMA, having this two-way discussion that, smooths things out and moves things forward quicker, so you don't come to that end point of like you've done all your trial design, all your natural history, et cetera, and then, they say no.
Last question?
Sure, if there's time. Otherwise, I can cede my time for it. All right, well, I'm the Chief Operating Officer for a nonprofit organization that supports services to accelerate cell and gene therapies. Wherever they start with the collection of the cells, we actually have a mobile leukapheresis center to go there to patients to give more patient access. But it's just one part of the puzzle for a larger ecosystem. And all of you presented really great ways to bring together stakeholders together, or show how you brought people together from numerous parts of the healthcare arena. What advice would you have, some tips? Maybe Claire, I can send it to you, because it is your network of stakeholders that I think I need to establish as well to really mobilize the solution we have and to bring about any ideas and questions and answers to other parts that I haven't been able to think through yet. So any tips or advice on how you brought that group together and built a network of stakeholders?
Yeah, no, the network's like super important, and everybody that we have in it is invested in making sure that it's the patient that's at the center and that's moving forward. I think we just really wanted to have very open, transparent discussions with people in the room being asked difficult questions. So, for example, when we had commercial partners within the room, and together with regulators, patient groups, and academic developers, asking, well, so why does your R&D cost X? How does that pan out? And so then to be able to have a really open discussion about that, and to be able to understand where other partners within the same ecosystem could help with that, to move something forward, which is, we're talking in the non-commercially viable space. So really, and again, I think what people said before is actually, or Terry, I think you said, people who are just really committed to the journey, and not doing it for some ulterior motive, but also being our network has a lot of people who are able to take what is learned from one discussion and apply it to a much broader population. So whilst everybody's working in like their own ultra-rare disease, actually, this is why things like this and information sharing is so important, because that's gonna be an improvement. So if you've got people who have been involved in different areas, different networks, they're good people to bring together because they will have seen that problem before. They will have seen a different way of doing it, and that's fits in again with being nimble. It seems to be the biggest word cloud from today.
Thank you.
Okay, this is our chair prerogative. Lightning fast round last question. If you had a new pool of funding today, where would you allocate it for the biggest impact? For example, early research, clinical development, infrastructure, partnerships, and how have you learned in this process to put funds for that best option? So just a quick phrase from each of you. If you had a new pool of money today, where would you put it for the biggest impact?
I'm academia, so I would put it, I think that the funding is really still needed for the discovery phase. I think some of the other things, we can do things that don't cost money. We can lobby for regulatory change that doesn't cost so much money. So I'm going to say, up front. I suspect it's going to go down the development pathway as we go down the table.
Actually, I'm going to go the other end. I would say for us, as I think about the entire ecosystem from discovery to approvals, for us, the real place in which we need that investment is that $15 to $25 million space that I showed, which goes from declaring human candidate to end of phase 1-2 human clinical data for really having that human experiment. And to me, that is the driver of go or no-go decision. And being able to fund that as an organization, to be able to not let any priorities of changing CEOs or changing stock markets affect whether we get to that human clinical data decision would be everything. And we have 9 therapeutic platforms, and we've only gotten 2 past IND, and we're working on our next 3 now. We need funding to get human data for all 9, and then look at, is combination therapy, who needs to go, who needs to stay, who needs to be pushed forward. We can't do that, and then share all that information with everybody else so that that platform will bring in other neurodevelopmental disorders like Angelman that can plug and play and share IND findings, have right of have the right of all of the IND information that can be filed with their INDs so they don't have to do the same tox studies, and be able to share and share and share and get out of our silos and push everything through. Until we fund all of that, we can't do that. For me, that's where it should go.
I agree with both. I'll be different. And, by the time we get to the end, we will lay out a platform here. So this hypothetical, if anybody has that giant check, just give it to all of us and we'll put this in place, right? Deal. I will be simple and say, would invest in large-scale, multi-omic, genotype, phenotype, platform data sets enabled by artificial intelligence and machine learning.
So first I'm going to do a plug because I forgot to do it for Thursday, Poster 2040. Go and see it. It's one of our trials where we're showing some data. The biggest thing I would say for us is we want to get this drug to all the kids, and the only way for us to do that is to get to approval. But if I was to have approval, I would say that where I'd want to put the money in is on the early development phase, because right now our vectors and our gene therapy is poor at best for where we're, it's the best we have today, but it's a poor model. And if we're able to go back and do like 90% transduction in the brain and treat more of the cells, then we can make a bigger impact. But right now, since we don't have any approved therapies, our goal is to get into the clinic, into the phase 3, get it approved by the FDA so that it's available to every child that's born now and tomorrow.
Okay. It's called Valley of Death for a reason. I would put the money, toxicology, end of phase 2, end of story.
Awesome. Thank you. So we are going to take a break and join back at 10:45 for our second session, which is going to be about diversifying revenue streams and funding opportunities. But first, please join me in thanking our wonderful lineup of speakers and panelists this morning.
Half of our board is family. So Eddie and Jill, they had a childhood friend. Jill's childhood friend that had EB, and like she's just a badass. She's like chair of our board, and she.
pretty close Saturday. Yeah, you?
I get to chat like the Friday, last Friday session.
Do you? Yeah. I'm here tomorrow. Sorry, Wednesday I present again, and then VGTC is until Friday afternoon. So I try not to keep on for more than 2 days because of people, but this is yeah, exactly. He's okay. This is him yesterday, actually.